We are live.
Great. Good afternoon, Council. I'd like to call this regular Council meeting of April 28th, 2026 to order with the adoption of the agenda. So I want to make the motion. Councilor Orlando, Councilor Carey, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular Council meeting of April 14th. Councilor Palmer, Councilor Cherry, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the special Council meeting of April 14th. Councilor Devlin, seconded by Councilor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from the regular Council minutes of April 14th? Councilor Staples.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just have a question to staff in regards to the RFP that was just issued. I wanted to thank them for getting that out in a timely manner, and I appreciate all the work that they've done. And I just wanted to clarify that I have a question regarding the current zoning. So current zoning, my understanding is that 15% of units need to be 2 bedrooms or larger. How does this current proposal align with that requirement?
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, Councillor Stapler. So the current zoning is Comprehensive Development Zone 6, and there's no specific requirements within that CD zone for composition of bedrooms. So city land, council obviously has final discretion on anything that comes forward on that land. That's why the zone is intentionally not as prescriptive as some of our other standard residential zones.
Okay. So I guess just to follow up, so I think I understand your answer. So if a private applicant was to bring forward a similar or identical design and build, it probably wouldn't be supported. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councillor Staples, just for clarification, a similar design build as
in regards to makeup of the unit. The makeup of units wouldn't be supported in other zones. Is that correct?
Got you. Through your worship, Councillor Staples, depends on the zone. So, for example, some of our mixed-use zones that permit multifamily dwellings don't have the minimum 3-bedroom requirement, but some of our standard residential zones that are medium density and high density have that 10% 3-bedroom requirement.
Great. Thanks for that clarification.
Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Any other business that was going into special council meetings, so there's no business arising from those minutes in April 14th. Thank you. All right. Just going into announcements from the mayor. A few announcements. We are hosting SILGA, Southern Ontario Local Government Association, this week here in Revelstoke. So as SILGA is taking over the community center, the hallway closed to the MP rooms will be closed to the public. That'll be taken over by members of SILGA to accommodate everyone with that. CBT Ready grants have been successful. The projects have been confirmed, and the recipients list can be found on the Ready grant page under the Community Economic Development tab on the city website. So if people want to look at that. Also, 4th Street, we all know is closed until May 29th. Just to advise, businesses are open along 4th Street, so you can get access to the businesses there, Southside, etc. All right, I'm going to move on to item planning document item 6A, development permit application. Mr. Simon, do you have a brief overview with that?
Through your worship, to all council, if council would like a high-level overview, I can provide that for the proposed application.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, please.
So before council today is a development permit and development variance permit application that's ultimately intending to facilitate the construction of 34 dwelling units within 3 multi-unit dwelling buildings. The variances that are requested for this project is to reduce the side yard setback to the north for an abutting residentially zoned lot from 4.5 meters to 3 meters. Increase maximum impermeable surface coverage from 65% to 82%, and to reduce the minimum number of off-street accessible parking spaces from 3 to 2, and reduce the minimum drive aisle width from 7.3 meters to 6 meters. One thing to note with the requested parking variance is it's not reducing the total amount of parking required, just the amount of accessible parking that makes up that total parking number. So the development is intended to be constructed in a manner that reflects the traditional single detached residential neighborhood in the vicinity. So the maximum building heights are about 10.5 meters to the midway point and about 12 meters to the peak. What we're seeing for single family dwellings is they can go up to 10 meters to the midway point. So very comparable from a height perspective. The proposed development has perimeter landscaping, trying to buffer any impacts from adjacent properties. They've strategically located parking to the west and the south of the development, again, to provide for further separation from adjacent properties, specifically the manufactured home park to the west. You'll see that there is parking adjacent to that lot to have more of an offset with the building and to have more of a high quality aesthetic on the traveled roadway from Oscar. There is bicycle parking associated with this development in compliance with the zoning bylaw minimum standards. And should council decide to go forward with this proposed application, we will require a landscape security prior to issuance of a building permit. And another item that will be required prior to issuance of a building permit is the owner entering into an agreement with the city for required capacity upgrades to the Oscar Street lift station. Director Black and myself have met with the proponent as recently as yesterday to sort out some of the finer details. And if there's questions about that, I would certainly defer to Director Black. But it does appear that we are well underway to finding an appropriate solution for this development and for the more broader upgrades that are required for sanitary infrastructure within that part of Revelstoke. One item to note as well, we did receive, I believe, 3 letters in response to the notifications that were sent out. And then a 4th one was received late. I believe the agenda was republished. That one was received around 10:50 this morning. 10 o'clock is usually the cutoff. And I believe it was republished with it being added on there. If not, I may have misspoke.
It was not, however, it will be republished after this meeting.
A summary of the comments that we've received thus far, they're predominantly surrounded around the reduction of the side yard setback from 4.5 to 3 meters, as well as some concerns with respect to impermeable surface. With respect to impermeable surface, all development will be required to contain all runoff on site. So they have engaged a civil engineer to ensure that an appropriate stormwater management system is designed for the lot. So any questions, happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Simon before he puts on? Councilor?
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is just confirmation this meets the parking requirement.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, it complies with all parking requirements except for the drive aisle width, which is pretty common for internal strata roads, as well as the accessible parking, but total number of parking spaces, it does comply.
Then further to that, just on that aisle width, so we've had similar variances to that. And so I'm trying to understand why, if that isn't acceptable, why wouldn't it be entrenched in the zoning bylaw?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, we have a total of, I want to say approximately 30 quite benign identified housekeeping amendments. And that is one of them. One of the things we want to be really careful for, though, reducing the drive aisle width to 6 meters for private parking spaces, not that big of a deal. The residents can sort through that within the strata development, and they're managing their own snow, generally speaking. But when we have that requirement for, let's say, a fully public parking area for a commercial business, we want to have the wider drive aisles to ensure appropriate access and egress for the vehicles. But for the private strata developments, we are looking to have some more specific regulations that would pertain to those.
Then further to that, did the fire chief, was there any remarks from the fire chief specifically to that?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, I can double check, but from my recollection on the file, I believe all comments from fire have been addressed, and I don't believe that they were specific to the drive aisle width. I'm just pulling it up right now, if you bear with me. The comments were more so related to the reduction of the side yard setback and how that would impact any limiting distances, which is really a BC building code matter that if we want to unpack that anymore, then I would defer to Mr. Gibbs here.
Right, okay. The next question through the chair, I think you probably answered this on the previous agenda item, but there was reference in your report of staff encouraging 3-bedroom units, and just want to understand the context of why, I guess, yes.
Through your worship, Councillor Palmer, the proponent has constructed several projects in town now. Many of those projects that do contain 3-bedroom units, typically in the form of vertical common wall row house development, townhouse style development. This development is a little bit more unique as a plex development. So 3-bedroom plex development is not something that we're typically seeing in the city. So staff did encourage the proponent, because originally at rezoning OCP amendment stage, if council recalls, it was anticipated that we may receive a variance for the 3-bedroom requirement, which does stipulate 10% of the units be 3 bedrooms. And we had worked with the proponent upon submission of the application, inquiring as to whether or not there was any ability to comply with that requirement. The proponent did come up with a design that can accommodate 4 3-bedroom units on site, which will ultimately comply with the bylaw. So staff wanted to work with them to minimize the amount of variances that are required for this application.
Okay, so through the chair, I'm just trying to understand it. And I guess the motivation, I'm just basically just trying to understand, and why wouldn't we just let the market figure it out themselves, let them build whatever, let the developers figure that out. So was that 3-bedroom technically a requirement? So by encouraging to conform with the bylaw?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, that is correct. It is a requirement within the RMD3 zone, which is the zoning of the subject property, that 10% of the units be 3-bedroom or greater. And so originally the proposal did not include 3-bedroom. So staff inquired if there was a way to comply with that bylaw requirement. Correct. It wasn't just a request from staff. It was a request to comply with the bylaw.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And there was an additional submission from the public that we don't have in our package, but it's going to be part of the package. Can we see that on the screen or something?
Ms. Floyd, do we have that?
Or was it emailed to us?
I think it was emailed.
And
Oh, it was emailed to Development Services. I will just ask Ms. Delassalle if she can share a redacted version to remove personal information.
So, and the reason for that, if it's going to be part of the agenda, it should be part of our consideration. And also, probably more importantly, kind of interesting what they actually have to say.
Yeah. While we're waiting for that, Councillor Stevens, do you have a question?
No, I believe Councillor Palmer touched on it. I was going to ask in regards to the narrowing of the strata roads and the impact that may have on emergency vehicles, but if the fire chief didn't have anything, I don't have any comments in regards to it. Thank you.
Councillor Cherry?
Yeah, while we wait, through the chair, if staff knows, how will stormwater mitigation, snow, be removed from this facility, this area?
Through your worship, I will note that the proponent is in the room. They may be able to provide further details. My understanding is that the strata will be responsible for snow removal, generally through a contracted service that hauls it off site. But proponent, it may be best to 100% confirm that with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Just I guess as we're waiting for that other information, I'm wondering whether to wait until we go into the debate. I have some concerns that we'll be discussing. Should we do that at this time, or you want me to wait until it's on the?
I'll wait till it's on the agenda if you can. Councillor Cherry, you're okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions for Mr. Simon at this
We'll
point?
be able to invite him up to explain that.
Yeah, that's just, so sorry, just specifically, sorry, it was a different issue from Councillor Cherry's, and I would suggest not having the developer come up during the debate, because I don't want the debate to be with the developer.
Okay.
So that should be beforehand if we're going to entertain
Okay.
that.
We'll do that.
However, my question was more on whether we want to have any dialogue, basically other items for what Councilor Cherry was saying.
Well, then if I can, if possible, I'd like to invite them up just to explain their storm mitigation efforts with
Sure.
the less impermeable surface area.
Mr. Bowen, if you'd like to come up to the podium, and then we'll get back to Ms. Delasella is showing us the email, so we'll get back to that in a moment. Welcome.
I thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, regarding on-site snow storage, we do have a civil engineer who identifies places for temporary storage or smaller snow events where it can be stored on site. We do design our roofs to be as large as we possibly can to store as much as we can as per city bylaws, as much as we can keep up on the roof as we possibly can in those events. Anything excess would be taken away. Over the last few years, hasn't been that big of an issue, but it does have to get taken away, and that is inside the condo bylaws to manage the snow inside. So snow mitigation using roofs, snow mitigation using the limited on-site spaces that we have, and then the rest of it gets taken away if it gets to EA.
And stormwater mitigation as well?
Stormwater is all handled on site through a comprehensive system. So using the drive aisles, the water all comes down. It's all contained. There is no off-site pumping to go into a city service in any way. It's taken care of on its own through the dry well, and then that well. And I believe it complies to the 100-year flood event is, I think, actually what the requirement is. I think that's the actual place this is.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. Just before you go, Mr. Bowen.
Yeah, I have one question, then I have for staff, and then other questions. Did this go through APC?
Through your worship, Councilor Palmer, no, this did not go to the Advisory Planning Commission, but the OCP amendment rezoning application, where a largely similar development concept was presented to them, did go before the agency.
Because it seems to me that we're maybe doing some of the function of APC through this direct questions through the developer. Anyway, thank you through the chair for your development and working with staff, and thank you for the projects that you have in town. Doing good work. I'll say I have concerns about the number of variances in the character of the town, the coverage, the impermeable space, and what that's looking like. From my lens, to me, as you already heard, I'd rather compromise on, if you want to sell 2-bedroom or whatever you want to sell, as opposed to green space on that. And of course, we're going to be going into the landscape security, but there's not very much left for landscape. And so that's a theme that I hear from residents about as we change it as a community. So I sort of get a sense of what you're doing, but that's one of the concerns that I have. And this is the same one that we talked about. I think I asked a question about horizontal strata or subdivisions. And again, from my lens, to me, that's a much better solution than what I'm feeling is a degradation of some character of Revelstoke. So I'm just being very transparent on that. And that's what I'm hearing from the letters. We have another one here. It's that kind of thing. People aren't opposed to the development as such. It's I started to think about, cities in South America, Mexico City, where, all the green space is kind of nuked out of places. And that's kind of where the concerns. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but if this comes forward based on that, I may be opposed, but there hasn't been any solutions. And maybe there's a referral to APC that they could wrestle with some ideas. So those are my comments. Those things.
Sure, Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, just if I may, a couple points of clarity that may benefit council. This proposal it is for horizontal party or horizontal subdivision, so it is establishing that as part of it in accordance with the MD3 zoning.
Yeah.
The impermeable surface requirement, please do keep in mind, it is a new bylaw requirement as of April 2025. So there will be some tweaks and changes over the years, of course, at establishing the exact right numbers. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only path to really sort through what the best option is to have it tested with the developers through real applications and then make tweaks and changes to these living documents as they go ahead. If council is not supportive of the impermeable surface, it doesn't necessarily translate to more green space because you could use things like permeable pavers to achieve required coefficient ratios and still not have as much green space. I'm happy to pull up the landscape plan that I think gives a good idea as well, if that would benefit council. And this is one of the things we did talk about with the zoning bylaw rewrite with the community at length. If we want more green space with development, the way you achieve it is through reduced parking. That this development, there is that requirement to have an increase in impermeable surface, a large part because of our parking requirements.
Yeah.
That's that trade-off, right? So just food for thought with council, right?
So if you want me to maybe answer or sort of explain our rationale on how we got here, if that would help.
I'd be happy.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when we started, Box Fort was leading in the inner city development in Revelstoke, even with the campfire development on the Silhouette River, where we helped establish a fourplex or townhome infill sort of middle ground between what then was we had single family and duplexes, or you went to all townhomes, and there was no sort of encouragement of missing middle small lot sort of development. We also were here during the debate on the zoning bylaw rewrite, and we were vocal on the horizontal party wall separation, which was really a desire to help us get proper in missing middle infill with the flexibility the industry needs to meet the demands of the Revelstoke community, which is attainability. The current bylaws, it sits in the low density district, would have required this almost the same amount of construction. And we tested that site multiple times. When we go to FSR or FAR as a density modifier, you get the same amount of building. You just get bigger units because I can't separate them the way that I'm going to be able to do them here. Let parking, let garbage sort of determine that appropriate unit mix. When we came to Mr. Simon and we asked him for this lot, our vision was actually to build this under the RLD3 district, which is the townhome district, but we wanted horizontal pottery wall subdivision to allow the subdivision to occur of the little units on the lower floor and the bigger units above. That flexibility would have required a significant change to the OCP. So we said to Mr. Simon, well, I don't necessarily need medium density. And in fact, the coverage, the lot coverage, if we would have went to RLD3 would have been similar to what we're providing now with a less variance requirement to build a similar built form than what we have currently here. We fell right in the middle of two bylaws, not wanting to use a CD district because it's discouraged amongst councillors that we go to CD districts. We said, okay, well, let's find a way. There will be some variances because we sit right in the middle. The 3-bedroom thing was one of them. I'll be honest, I pushed back very hard on the 3 bedrooms because they're difficult to achieve. I will say the outcome of the new 3-bedroom design, I am very, very happy and very excited to offer them. And I would actually give Mr. Simon a lot of credit for pushing me this hard. APC has pushed me hard every time I've gone to APC, as I'm sure Council Cherry can admit. It always comes out with us finding a new way. This land use did go to APC. We showed them a site plan. They gave me concerns and feedback, and we redesigned it after that as well. So we are constantly evolving to meet the needs and the demands in Revelstoke. In this instance, we are looking to achieve a significant number of 1-bedroom units on a smaller size to be at a more attainable price point than we've seen in a long time. By also offering the 2-story townhomes above the small suites in the beginning or in the front, now at 3 bedrooms, I believe we'll be able to offer 3-bedroom homes that punch well above their weight class in terms of the amenity they're offering at price points we haven't seen in the city a long time, allowing more people, families to stay in the community and buy homes. It does mean asking for flexibility at times, the trade-off of how do we get attainability and how do we provide a good living space. We have maximized the landscaping opportunities on the site by providing a very comprehensive landscape plan, landscaping the front boulevard, the setbacks from the street, and that front boulevard is really heavily landscaped with some nice trees, or the trees that we can get in with line assignments, but also really trying to landscape the edges of the 2 buildings so that anything that can be seen from the streets are sort of hidden using soft landscaping. The courtyard in the middle has a significant amount of landscaping inside of it, meant to feel like a hiking trail. So it's got little trees inside. Instead of it just being grasses and gravel, which would just be a mode of egress, it's meant to be a pleasant walk when you walk through the development and get it. It'll also create some privacy screening for the units that are at the grade level as you walk through, but it's meant to sort of feel like an adventure as you walk through it. So we have thought very, very closely about it. On the flip side, if we're just trying to hit a number for landscaping or impermeable surface landscaping, it doesn't mean, as I think a lot of people think it's going to be, which is we're going to build yards. We're going to give people yards. That's not what ends up happening. It ends up being a calculation going like, okay, we cut the asphalt back to a strip here and we gain this space. And do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of a engineering exercise to hit the number. Why not really try to maximize the homeowner experience, ensure that we can contain stormwater, we can manage parking, we can hit all those numbers. And in this instance, we've also provided a rooftop patio for a common gathering spot that actually is very usable, that maximizes the views, because we do have those southwest views of Begbie and Mackenzie from the 4th floor. And we thought, well, why not give everyone the opportunity to go up there and utilize the space? So there is a lot of thought about common amenity, how it's used. If it's us just trying to hit a certain number of impermeable surfaces, what it will most likely look like is like trim the asphalt a little bit more, kind of cut the concrete here, and we will gain those spaces. I don't know if we'll ever hit the exact number that we have to do. Doesn't necessarily mean what most people think it does, which is there'll be a play space for children. That's not necessarily what this is. This is meant to be attainable housing for families who want to live here. And also, we encourage people to explore Southside and the beautiful Quebec Park that exists and the walking trails and that are all around, that really are the amenities that in kind of an inner city setting that most people should use. Those little sort of post-sized backyards that are small enough for a poodle to go to the bathroom, they're not really play spaces, but they meet the bylaw. So what are we trying to accomplish? And there's a lot of trade-offs that happen in there.
Follow
Thank you.
up, Councilor Stephens?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share your perspective with council regarding you initially mentioned the pushback regarding 3 bedrooms. So maybe you could just share your experience with building 3 bedrooms, what the market wants, what you end up seeing as a developer.
Yeah. So we built a lot of 3-bedroom units, a lot. I have a lot of 3-bedroom units for sale currently in terms of the market, asking for 3-bedroom units. It's once again, they want 3-bedroom units, but they want them 400,000. It's not what they think. It's not the same. In my opinion, I grew up sharing a bedroom with my brother. I turned out, hopefully just fine. But it's not uncommon if we provide better bedroom spaces that are larger, that activities can actually occur in, right? There's ways that I can hit 3-bedroom requirements, but those 3-bedroom requirements become very, very little. So now it's just room for a twin bed, and then where do toys go, Where do kids access, right? Allow us the flexibility to explain this, and the market has never been wrong. They'll tell us when we've gone in a different direction. In this instance, we've hit what we believe, and I'm not sure if the new plans are shared, but the 3-bedroom plans that we've put together, I'm extremely excited about, because they took a significant engineering to get to them where they are, but the amenity inside them are really, really well. They're flexible. We asked if we could offer them as 2-bedroom dens with the ability to convert. There was not the ability to, it must be 3 bedrooms, so we provided 4. We've exceeded the number, but it's really difficult to do. We were able to achieve it in this product type because we're missing middle, because we're basically a townhome, not an apartment building, which is what our MD3 was basically intended to do. Had we been an apartment building, it would have been extremely difficult for us to fit the bylaw perfectly, because units stack on top of each other. So we're either going to be under or over. There's no way that you can hit that threshold depending on how your building layout goes. It is an extremely restrictive policy that isn't necessarily market driven. I understand the intent, but also the market isn't asking for that product at this moment. They're asking to be able to afford homes. And when I say people to afford homes, it's first-time purchasers who can't afford to be in the market. It's people who live in Revelstoke and have lived in here for a generation, have a significant amount of home equity that would like to purchase a second property to participate in the growing economy that's going on here. It's people who would like to come and live here 3 months a year and don't want to spend $1 million on a townhome, but need a place, right? There are houses for everyone who's going to help the economy here. I don't have short-term rental zoning, so we know that that's through whatever restriction I don't regulate. That's however it's regulated in the city. But at very least, we know that this can appeal to the most number of people who can maximize. I did this in Peaks, the development on 4th. We had 7 one-bedroom suites. I had 2 waiting lists for them. I get phone calls every single day asking for more of them. I still have lots of townhomes with 3 bedrooms left to sell.
Mayor Soul, we do have a.
I'm just
Sorry.
letting it finish.
No, I think it's really valid for council to hear about the concerns regarding 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. And we haven't even talked about the implications of having a 3-bedroom, and now all of a sudden, rather than having a family in there, you have 6 people and 6 cars, and now you wonder why you hear about concerns regarding parking. So rather than hear about it from councilors who have experience in housing, hear from a developer and take this. So appreciate that.
Any other questions? I'd like to move on. I'll ask one more time. Any other questions for Mr. Pullman?
Thank you.
Just for clarification, I wasn't, appreciate the comments as well, but we do have a large agenda and a very packed week.
Yep, I'm managing that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go back. Thank you, Mr. Pullen. I'm going to go to 2 things. I want to see that email that came in that Ms. Delassalle has ready for us to look at. Make it a little bigger, please. Can any of you see that?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's because I pay money for glasses.
I'm not able to see it, but it's fine. It could be emailed to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's big now. Concerns about headlights. Always closer.
Sufficient for me, thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Delassalle. I think we've got the gist of the concern. Mr. Simon, can you just put up the landscaping for me, please?
Your worship, so you can see perimeter landscaping around the whole site and then interior to the corridors as well. And I believe the staff report has the total number of trees and shrubs. It's quite extensive.
That's fine.
I'm prepared to put the motion on the table.
Go ahead.
The development variance permit DBP 2026-1 be issued at 1015 and 1009 Oscar Street as per the rest as written in the report.
Okay, seconder for that motion, please. Councilor Stapleton.
I'll speak briefly to it. I appreciate the work that staff did, appreciate the developers' work. I also very much appreciate the comments from the public and shared those concerns. It does become a balancing act of what's in the best interest of the community. And that price point is an important component, the affordability. I think there's more work that we could be doing at the bylaw stage to give that the market flexibility so that we don't have this. And I guess the other comment, I do think something like this that has so many changes should be fully vetted through the APC so that we're not kind of doing what I would consider their work. But thank you very much. Thank you to the developer. Thank you to staff, and thank you for the community for speaking up on this.
Okay. Any other comments from council on the motion on the table? Seeing Councilor Lana?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mayor Souls. I appreciate the dialogue ahead of this, especially looking at the zoning, especially pertaining to like horizontal firewalls and stuff. I know prior to this application, I've had discussions with council and development services staff about looking at our OCP and subsequently our zoning bylaw to enable forms that would have maybe similar density but easier to build, and it looks like it's something that will be in the future. Looking at the conversation today as well as the last time we saw this particular application, it looks like it's going to go through. I don't see anyone jumping in front of the line to say no, but I guess my feedback is that the variances here, in my mind, are part of enabling something that's just a little bit too far in terms of size and impact, and that is my basic comment. I'm not wildly against it. I'm satisfied with the responses from staff and the applicant regarding water runoff, which I know is a concern for people in the neighborhood. But just in terms of overall intensity, one of the things we can do as a council, and I think in terms of reducing the cost of housing, private development housing, in terms of our interface with that process, is it make it quicker to get from the application to getting the approval to go. When we're going through this route, it inherently, the variances route inherently is going to slow things down by quite a while. So what I would like to see in the future is when we have time and is to engage in that conversation about where perhaps our forms and densities are a little bit off. But in the interim, what I'm concerned about is what people, concerns, for example, of the adjacent neighborhood, if they seem, in the letters that I've received, people are aware of the rules and seem to be fairly informed on some of the issues that they're facing here as a result of the variants that are here. So, and I want to listen to those things, and I feel that if we, again, this is for future revisions to OCP and zoning bylaw, that if we can get that there to a point where it is viable for applicants to say, hey, this form here, this is going to work for me, I can go do this. I don't even know I need to go the council route to get variance for this. We can just get it done, and that's what I would like to see. So my vote is not, fully against it, not opposed to it. It's just, I think it's just trying to send a message that I think the intensity that is allowed is just a little bit too much in this case. So I just wanted to put that out as my view.
Any other comments, Councilor Terry?
Thanks. Although this is going to be mostly directed towards staff, council should hear it too. We had the conversation in the zoning bylaw rewrite about minimum setbacks and making them meet building code. And we decided to not do that. This development shows that that's something we should consider in our next upcoming amendments to that, housekeeping amendments, because that would, again, speed up this process and get more houses built.
Good. All right. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Saying none, all those in favor? Opposed? Note Councilor Orlando's opposed, balance of council in favor. This motion passes. Number 2, someone want to put that on the table for me, please? Councilor Lucelle.
I move that development permit DP 2026-1 be issued at 1015 and 1009 Oscar Street for the form and character of 3 multi-unit dwellings containing 34 dwelling units, landscaping and parking.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councilor Staples. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 3. Councilor Lucelle.
I move that the owner provide security for the due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate to the City of Revelstoke in the form of cash or unconditional irrevocable auto-renewing letter of credit issued by a Canadian Chartered Bank or credit union prior to issuance of a building permit.
Seconder, Councilor Staples. Discussion on this motion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 4, Councilor Lucelle.
That the owner shall enter into agreement with the city if required to ensure that all sanitary system upgrades necessary to address the cycling and capacity constraints of the Oscar Street lift station are completed in accordance with the Oscar Street lift station review memo prepared by WSP to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering and Public Works prior to issuance of a building permit.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councilor Devlin. Any discussion on this motion? Councilor Palmer.
Just a question for your staff. The lift station review memo, did council see a copy of that?
Mr. Black.
Through your worship to Council Palmer, the WSP memo that was created to address some of the concerns related to this lift station were summarized in a report for the Johnson Heights subdivision. So that would have taken place around 21, 22. And that was to develop a local area service plan or opportunities to find funding to build the infrastructure needed to support further development in the Johnson Heights area. If some council so desires, I can be sure to forward that information on to all the council. The developer's engineer will be working on a supplement to that report, which will be required for my approval.
Councilor Palmer, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Souls. So I'll be in favor of the motion. Just a technical thing, though, we are making a decision based on a report we haven't seen. And it sounds like there's some additional information here that perhaps belongs with the infrastructure committee sometime in the future.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor Souls.
All right. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon, Mr. Black, and to our proponent. Appreciate the comments and answering the questions. And move on to item 9A, bylaws, tax rate bylaws. Councilor Chair.
I move that the 2026 City of Revelstoke tax rate bylaw number 2439 be read at first, second, and third time.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Devlin. Discussion on the motion.
Yep, we've discussed this at length through committees, finance, and here. This is being read at first, second, and third time to keep with our current timeline for adoption.
Great. Appreciate the comment. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Wastewater treatment plant upgrade, temporary boring bylaw. Mr. Black, you have a brief overview?
I do not, Your Worship. This memo or this report was prepared by Director Moore.
Great. Yes, I remember her telling me that. So thank you for that. So she's answered as much as she can. So this wastewater treatment plant upgrade borrowing bylaw, she's asking us to allow the city to borrow up to $7 million for any potential upgrades or infrastructure costs. Looking at it right now, we are at 4.2 million. But allowing that extra means that they don't have to come back to council if we need to increase. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mayor, so I'm just trying to understand, I didn't have time to sort of go back into all the detail, but this saga with the wastewater treatment plant of escalating costs is troubling, at least. And that, so are we sensing another escalation in costs?
No, but there's inflation and costs because of tariffs, that sort of thing. When I met with Ms. Moore talking about this, we had originally talked about borrowing $7 million and we're still within that construct, correct? And she just wants to make sure that the bylaw gets embedded correctly, that we have that potential to go to 7 million just in case.
Correct.
Mr. Black?
Your worship, if I may add, current budget information, and we will be bringing that information to the PIC on a monthly basis. I think it's been almost 2 months now since council seen our last report. However, I believe we're up to change order 10, and the total value of the change orders to date is approximately $60,000 out of 15 million that we spent to date. And we have no anticipation of further cost escalations or exceeding the budget at this time. Nothing is a glaring red flag.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Councilor Palmer first for follow-up, if there's any.
Yeah, so that's good news, and good to hear that the change orders are fairly minimal. But then there's part of me that's saying, well, how come we need this little buffer just in case? So
I'm not the financial director, but I think she's making sure that have everything in place should something change. We can't just go out and borrow the money just because we want to go to the pub. Mr. Block.
And your worship, through the council, Palmer, should we exceed the project budget, which is 23,700,000 and some odd dollars, we would return to council with that request and a budget attached to it, so that you would be the ones approving increase to that project budget.
Sounds good, thanks.
Councilor Stigner, please.
Just a question. I think I know the answer, but those service upgrades and change orders, that's not increasing the service to accept the sewage from homes that are on septic fields, is it?
Through your worship to Councillor Seymour-Hurst, the acceptance of septage, household septage is currently not accepted at our plant. It is not proposed to be accepted until we establish a septic receiving station. Staff have had consultants look at some preliminary numbers, and they range around $2.5 million for construction of that sort of facility. It is required that we meter the effluent entering into the system so that it doesn't overtax the reactors at the wastewater treatment plant, and we need to be able to quantify the volumes and odor control at those stations where that septic would be received. Currently working on some opportunities, and we have, I believe, gone to council 4 or 5 months ago with a joint grant application with the PSRD to construct a facility like that. We were not successful. We will continue to push that. That is also part of our liquid waste management plan, in which we must address that issue in our future, and likely sooner than later.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. I really do appreciate it.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 10, unfinished business. This liquor license application is between the two entities at RMR. They don't have all of their ducks in a row quite yet, so we're asking for it to be deferred. Does somebody want to put that motion on the table from the council?
I'll move that liquor license application LIQ 2026-001 be deferred until such time as the owner provides proper ownership authorization for the requested changes to the liquor license.
Second for the motion, Councilor Lucero. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to staff reports, Revelstoke Airport. Mr. Parliament, do you have an oversight here that you would like to give us before we put a motion on the table?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to keep it to 5 minutes or less. most of what's in the report you have seen before, specifically the funding formula. The annual budget of the airport for 2025 was roughly $540,000 projected. That means revenues of the same amount equal the expenditures of the same amount minus the deficit. So what does that mean? Well, the deficit in 2025 was pegged at 180,000. And under the current formula, 85% is paid by the city, 15% is paid by CSRD Area B. And what does that mean? So for 2025, that's 153,000 to the city and 27,000 to Area B. So it's the annual deficit that we share the 85-15 breakdown. The goal is to bring the airport to a neutral position where there is no more deficit. It's one of the main reasons that I am recommending that we transfer ownership back to the city. The city operated the airport for the first roughly 15, 16 years when it was built in the 60s. CSRD took it over in 1980 and has been running it ever since. But the partnership between the two entities has never changed. It's always been the city and the CSRD working together. Again, back in the mid 60s and all of the 70s, it was the city managing it in partnership with the CSRD. It turned in 1980, and now here we are in 2026 looking at another turn, but the partnership remains the same. I'm not going to get into the details of the background summary. I can tell you that the Economic Development Commission spent a lot of time on this. They asked some pointed questions on grants, on some revenue streams that need to be looked at. The CSRD and the city are committed to looking at hangar leases, the fuel station, parking, landing, and other ancillary type revenues. In terms of the grant application, there are several grants that we are looking at. Most notable is the small grant that we applied for a master plan. There's also REDUP funding available later this summer, early fall. If you recall, REDUP was the city of Revelstoke was successful in receiving REDUP funds for the Section 17 lands over on West Side Road. We received $100,000 to do a feasibility study on the highest and best use of those lands. Upon completion of that program, we'll be able to apply for another REDUP intake later this fall, which most likely would be for airport planning, and not so much infrastructure. We want to focus on the planning, which is a business plan, which is a master plan, which is a financial plan. I can also say that with the work of our staff in CED, we're able to convince the federal government to change the scope of a $49,000 grant under CAN Export. It was to be dedicated towards Section 17 lands, but because we got REDUP funding and we're doing feasibility, we're able to change the scope and direct it to the airport. So that just under $50,000 allows the city to look at investment opportunities that can be used for consulting fees, feasibility research, data collection, outreach, and indigenous engagement for the airport. So that $50,000 is there. It's been approved by the federal government. So we have that. We also have access to EOF funds. And there's other grants that staff have been able to find because EDC asked for some more specifics on what both capital and planning grants are available. There's the capital project grants under the province of BC. There's Canada Community Building Fund, Union of British Columbia Municipalities. There's Housing Infrastructure Communities Canada, the Build Community Strong Fund recently announced, and Look West, Jobs and Prosperity for a Stronger BC. These are grants that we are pursuing. In terms of the assets of the airport, basically you got the terminal building, you've got the fuel station, you've got the hangars, and you've got surface area that's owned by the CSRD and would be transferred to the city. There are other buildings on there. Those are private buildings, but in essence, what the asset list comprise of is the terminal building, which downstairs houses our fire truck, upstairs houses our EOC. You have the hangars and you have the fuel station. The province has its own fuel station for wildfire, and that's the new building that you see there. They're going to be investing in their fuel station. In terms of the operating and capital reserve, we've got confirmation from the CSRD that the operating reserve of $187,000 will flow with the transfer. to the city. It is recommended we put that into the statutory reserve for the airport. The operating reserve, although it's not a big number, it continues to grow and is accessed for one-off extraordinary operating items that are needed outside the annual budget. So if you need 30, 40,000 for this or that, you access the operating reserve. There's a capital budget of just over 1.1 million that will also flow with the sale. Again, that would put into a reserve dedicated to just for capital, and it would most likely be to top up a grant. So if we receive a grant application of $1 million or $500,000 and we had to give 10%, 25%, 40%, we would access the capital grant to top up any major capital fund that we're looking for. What else can I say to conclude before you debate? I can answer any questions on the options. They're there for you. Option 1 is what's recommended, and if approved, most likely the EDC would be charged at looking at a different governance model for the airport. I'm not recommending that the city all of a sudden get into the airport management business per se. There are 2 governance models out there. You can have an airport commission, you can have an airport authority. There's different ways to look at setting up those commissions where you basically appoint aviation experts and operators on the either authority commission. We can look at that, and that's explained under option 1. In summary, this is about gaining control and accessing grants to improve the airport. I haven't really talked about commuter service. Commuter service was brought to Revelstoke a couple of years back. We all know the challenges with their airport. Bringing back commuter service is something that we would look at, working with the EDC. We've got a couple of leads on that, but first of all, let's get the master plan done, determine exactly what infrastructure upgrades have to be done, apply for grants, et cetera, et cetera. The CSRD has agreed to hold their corporate vote on June 18th. They have a meeting in May that it was originally scheduled for, but the meeting is in Malacqua. The CSRD meeting is in Malacqua. They have a large agenda, and it was recommended by the CAO, John McLean, that this corporate vote be moved to June, of which, of course, our mayor represents us. And this is also supported by Director David Brookshill. With that, I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from council? Council Chair?
I was actually going to put it on the table.
Okay.
Okay. I move that the full transfer of YRV ownership. From the
Can you just say Revelstoke Airport in that part? It makes it easier for
Sounds good.
minutes.
I move that the full transfer of the Revelstoke Airport ownership from the Columbia Shuswap Regional District to the City of Revelstoke be formally endorsed, and that the mayor to bring it forward.
We can leave out the 2.
Yeah, okay. And that the mayor bring it forward to the June 18th, 2026 CRCD board meeting in Salmon Arm by motioning for a corporate vote finalizing the sale.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councilor Devlin. Discussion on the motion. Somebody want to weigh in? Councilor Cherry.
Thanks. This is a unique opportunity for the City of Revelstoke to not only gain ownership as well as operating of the airport, but also the $1.35 million in reserve funds. This opens up significant economic development through tourism, through tourism. A number of stakeholders have been consulted and are all in favor with it, and I do encourage members of council to support this. On top of that, currently the taxpayers are paying $150,000 to the airport. Just like with other taxable items, when we've gone through them on the just like other items that impact taxation, we've gone through and found that we're losing money or didn't have control of. This is an opportunity for us to actually operate it, bring it up to its functional level, and hopefully bring down the cost of the taxpayer.
Thank you. Other comments, Councilor Devlin?
Yeah, I'm just gonna weigh in a little. Just some comments. I mean, this to me seems like a no-brainer. I am not an expert in business, but if somebody was to offer to let me buy into a company for 85%, they were operating at $150,000 to $200,000 loss every year, and I would have zero control over that. I would say no. That's a really bad deal. So if you're going to be paying for it anyway, you may as well own it so that you can stop the leak. That's been my comments on this every time it's come up, and that continues to be the taxpayers are paying for something that we cannot fix under the current model. And it would be, in my opinion, very bad governance to continue down that road if we have an opportunity to fix it. So that's just my only comments there.
Councillor Stickers?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm in favor of this. My concern is that we seem to have a growing list of unfinished projects. We hear continuously from staff about capacity. And my question and concern is moving forward, if we do agree to this or we vote in favor of this, how are we going to manage that internally? How are we going to manage those risks? And it's great to look at things with like a rose-colored glasses. But I think ideally what would be is we'd have all the funding set up, we'd have the master plan done, and we'd know what we're getting into prior to embarking on this. So I'd love to hear comments from staff or from council.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through Councillor Stapenhurst, great question. I think the approach has to be a methodical one. We can't be rushing into this. This is no different than the other assets that we currently own. The approach would be to focus on the planning side rather than the infrastructure side on the short term. And when I say planning side, a master plan, a business plan, a financial plan. Well, what are the list of assets? What are their conditions? What do the experts suggest in terms of what needs to be done? You have to adopt a methodical approach rather than just jumping in and focusing on the infrastructure side, which that involves millions of dollars. The complexities and the strict regulations with Transport Canada and NAV Canada are challenging. I say if this is adopted by council and supported by our partner, the CSRD, that we take a methodical approach and focus on the master business and financial plan, and then make strategic decisions based on those documents. Thank you.
If I could jump in, just to give an example of another model that works. If you look at our CFC, which has paid dividends to the community upwards of, I believe, tens of millions of dollars since its inception, that model where you have a working group of experts, a staff member when appropriate, and council is usually the best way forward. Rather than just fully relying on staff.
Thank you for that example, but there's also other examples where we haven't been so successful in our endeavors. So that's, again, the rose-colored glasses is always, it's always great to look at the optimism and be like, yeah, we're going to nail this. And then there's also, the caveat that says we've got a long list of things that we want to accomplish that we hear about from the community on a daily basis that aren't being addressed. So I'm just trying to weigh out the pros and cons here.
And with that one, we have taken it over to solve that issue as well. I hear where you're going from though.
Councillor Dillon?
Just a comment to kind of piggyback off that. I do agree that we require things such as master plan, business plan, financial plan, but those plans are just pieces of paper. We have no power to implement any of them. It's great to do the planning, but if you don't have the authority to implement the plans, then what's the point of wasting time planning? That's kind of my view on it. I think that ownership is the first step. We're not talking about changing the payment structure. We're talking about getting to a place where we can then begin to fix these things. And it probably, full transparency, will not be this council that does any fixing of any of this, but it's, if we were talking about changing the payment structure, I would have significantly more concerns. But as we're talking about status quo, except the city then has the authority to start working on those things, I don't see a downside. I see exactly zero negatives to taking it over, other than lose $10 whole.
I think just to maybe answer to Councillor Devlin's comments, I can't speak about purchasing airports, but I kind of view this similar to buying real estate. And prior to buying real estate, you might spend $1,000 on a home inspection to figure out what you're buying into. Similar to master plans and business plans, you might spend a little bit of money to know what you're embarking on before you're knee deep and you bought out your partner and now you're the only one holding the reins. So that's, you can look at it either way, right? Like, yeah, you're getting all the risk. Sometimes you're getting all the reward too. So
yeah, but I mean, we're not buying out a partner. We're keeping the exact same partnership with the exact same format we have. The only difference is that we have the power to eventually make those decisions if we choose to. We're still paying for that away.
And I haven't heard anything from the CSRD saying that they wouldn't be willing to embark on the master plan either, so.
That's fine.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Thank you, Mayor Souls. Just curious, Mayor Souls, Councilor Orlando, I think you're on the Economic Development Commission. I'm not seeing any clear recommendations from the commission here specifically. It's inferred, but I'm just wondering from your lens, any issues, or are they 100% going to charge ahead? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, no. So the recommendations from the Economic Development Commission came a few months ago. They are listed in the report. The three main options, such as do not purchase, purchase with light improvements, purchase with heavier improvements. So those are incorporated here, but that was the recommendation. What the staff and ACDEV has done is apply for the BC Air Access Program, which is a grant, I think it's 35 grand. We have applied, I think, in January or February, but we're not due to hear until June, whether we're successful with that one. The next intake for REDIP is, I think, July to September, which is another one of the three grants we identified for looking at this, planning for the facility, which has been, not really looked at in any meaningful way as long as I can remember. So those were the recommendations. However, I mean, I would say in the two different purchase options that were floated as a recommendation to council, they looked at different options for the airport, what could be done, what can't be done. The original CSRD report, which is available on their website if you just do CSRD Airport, Revelstoke Airport, is a good technical document, and that that was completed a few years ago prior to our time, and it does do a pretty good explanation of things like which navigation options are available to us, what equipment could improve the airport, what would work, what wouldn't. Reading through it gives you a much better understanding of what is possible and what isn't. And I think probably the most important thing that was, I guess, exclusively the domain of the work done on the commission, including really qualified people in this exact department, people who oversee large capital projects, property managers, people with a lot of business experience, is the capital or sort of the capital budget side, not the operational side. So the forecast through 8 years from now is an operational deficit of just over $10 million in liabilities. Nearly $4 million for the runway rehab in 2031, $500,000 for taxiway rehab. Apron rehab is nearly $2 million for 2029. etc. We've actually surpassed a couple of those ones, but it's a lot. So, I would categorize it as a distressed asset, and just in the same way you're going to go consider investing in a business, you want to do your due diligence ahead of time and be aware of these things, because, I don't think Revelstoke can afford this $10 million operational deficit, and we need a plan to do that. And having a plan, which, the first step of which is the management plan, which we'll hear back in June if we're successful on this one or not, is, exploring these issues, exploring how we're going to do it, taking a look at it. We have partnered, just because the CSRD has sort of the Economic Development Commission has a representative from CSB and as well as the city, with David Brooks Hill being the Area B director on there. We are able to, take a look at these issues and move through them in terms of management. My view right now is moving to borrow it in June. I guess my question would be, what is the difference between, voting yes and saying, hey, let's go buy it, versus delaying until we have initial work on management plan, and until we have internalized these operational costs, which on the reports presented are not necessarily accounted for. This is a lot of money, $10 million and this is not improving the place. This is not adding new equipment. This is just keeping it operational. Now, we will pay that more or less if we leave it with the CSRD, but by getting that plan, what it gives us is the ability to negotiate better, the ability to know who we're going to need to be consulting with. The initial CSRD report identifies like 60 different stakeholders. It's not just the flying club. It's lots of different people, including, for example, Revelstoke Search and Rescue is looking to relocate a building there. My concern is that we're not there yet. I don't think there's a benefit from doing this now versus waiting until we have a management plan in place and doing it then. We can complete that management plan in partnership with the CSRD and go through a process of getting those numbers, understanding those liabilities, understanding the need to do's, not even the nice to haves, which we would like to have. So my recommendation would be to not support this now. And I do have a technical question that I'm going to pop on staff. I think it's more about corporate services, but if this is rejected, what is our time limit to bring it back again? Is it like 3 months or 6 months? Or I don't want to pull something too far down the menu if that was the case.
Thank you, Councillor Orlando. Because it's not an application, I don't think there is any statutory limit when it can be brought back again. So my thought would be, hey, well, here in June, if we're successful with the management plan, then we're going to be going through a process of understanding our requirements, understanding how we're going to staff this, understanding what our plan is to pay for all of these upgrades that are coming up, understanding all of our options. I don't support moving ahead right now until we have those fundamentals in place, because it's just like buying a used house. The analogy was mentioned earlier, like, do you get a building inspector and understand some of the numbers, or you just slap the money down and say, yeah, whatever, it looks good to me? I think most people would want that building inspection first, and that is what this management plan gets us. So I don't think there's a rush to do this right now. I'm not sure what the rush is to do this transfer right now versus do it in 6 months when we have better pictures and better numbers, and we can understand the liability and the debt that we're taking on here, and hopefully at that point, as a city, we'll have a better negotiating position for this project, and that's my feeling.
Long answer to a short question. Thank you. You have a follow-up before I go to Mr. Porter?
Yeah, it's interesting. A couple points. I do have a couple other questions first before making comments. And I think this is probably for staff, but that RADEC presentation attachment in November 2025, was that presented to council or to the commission? I just don't recall that.
I believe it went to the commission.
Okay, to the commission, not to us. Okay.
So which attachment is that? Sorry.
It's linked attachment number 5.
Okay, thanks.
And it seems that in context that in this context probably should have been presented to council at some form. I'll make a few comments. Okay, first of all, concurring with Councillor Devlin and the way you articulated, yeah, it makes sense. This just makes sense. We don't need to buy it. I think that very, very clear. However, great qualifier. Questions on the governance, not having these pieces in place as to what does that look like? And maybe there's a question, maybe I'll pause before more comments. I do have a question from staff's perspective through the chair. Councillor Orlando said, okay, well, what's the rush? Like, what's the rush right now? Because this wasn't part of our strategic planning. Why right now? And why not wait until all these other pieces are in place?
That's your question?
Yeah.
Mr. Palmer?
Actually, I would counter that by saying we've known for some time about this issue. It's the CSRD asking for the transfer. They've made it very clear. We do not have a governance model right now. It's literally being done off the side of a desk of both departing and existing staff at the CSRD, where they just don't have capacity. They are the one recommending that we look at this. They believe that local control and local ownership is best for the community. They remain committed to being a partner. They've been asking now for 2 years I brought this an original report to council a year ago. This presentation was presented to council. Kat Moffat did present the presentation that you see. It was the goal to bring it September, October 2025. It's been delayed for 6-7 months from the city's point of view by looking at the assets, by looking at the financial models, by looking at the grant opportunities. It is our partner who is asking that this sale go through. I have delayed the report to council, and the CSRD has also delayed their corporate vote until all the answers were provided. I'd like to point out a clarification. Councilor Orlando, you mentioned a $10 million operating deficit. Can you please explain? Because there's no $10 million operating deficit.
When you combine, sorry, it might be the phrasing, when you combine the capital requirements with ongoing operational losses, that's where we get at. And for a bit more precision clarity, a couple of those projects do, for example, involve widening, which is an improvement, but the substantial improvements that would increase technical ability to accept different type of airplanes are not included in that at all. So that is additional many millions. And just to that point, and it's sort of a technical thing, kind of unrelated, but understanding what will and will not work and what the potential and opportunity through the technical requirements of the various navigation systems is really important. We cannot do some things that because they will not work according to our geography and other types of requirements. So I feel that sometimes people are thinking there's going to be more benefit with these improvements than are actually going to be achievable, and that is maybe just people having different perceptions of things. And the key thing is summer versus winter operations. So there's a lot that can be done to improve it for summer. Winter remains constrained for various technical and rules-based reasons. But again, in the response, I would say it may have been delayed according to the wished timeline, but what is the benefit? What is the downside to waiting until at least we have these capital numbers in front of us? At least we are fully aware of the liability that we are taking responsibility for until we have a management plan, not even short term, but in terms of, how we're going to staff stuff, all the rules, et cetera, and what is going on. I don't know that there's a benefit to doing that right now. And I think council will be in a better position to make a better decision once these grant applications, we hear back and we're able to get started on those, because we will have those numbers. We will have that ability to do that. And the work will be progressing according to what council has directed already. So we will be moving in that direction. We are already making the applications and looking to get more grant funding and put effort into this one. But, and we'll be in a better position to make this decision and have a better negotiating position, frankly, including looking to those issues which are not really fleshed out in this report on, having some sort of authority looking over it. That's not that common in aerodromes in BC. It's usually larger airports. How we do that, I think it behooves us to understand and know that and have at least some direction or consensus before we jump both feet.
All right, good. Thank you, Councilor. Yeah.
I stand corrected. The presentation was presented to REDC on November 13th and to council on 25th.
Was that November 13th, 2024 or 2025?
2024. Okay, we'll follow up, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I saw that, and then with Kat's and being mentioned there, I remember this presentation and some of this discussion happened at that time. I think some of the dialogue that we're having here is chicken egg. What do you do? Transfer to this stuff, and fair either way. Just based on the question on the recommendation, if this goes through, so council's endorsing that we're endorsing the transfer of the ownership. It goes to the CSRD to vote on finalizing the sale on June 18th. Does the transfer happen immediately after that meeting? And maybe, so the question is on the timelines and clarification of what this actually means.
Through the chair, I talked to John McLean about that. There's still some legal and there's some papers to be signed. And just going through your typical governance bureaucracy, 60 to 90 days post the corporate vote is typical. So when you look at similar corporate votes for assets that are transferred, whether it's a landfill, whether it's a recreation center, whether it's an airport, involving both municipal governments and regional districts, it's typically 60 to 90 days post the corporate vote.
Well, yes, thank you for that. So basically at the end of the summer.
Yep, correct.
September.
Correct.
There. The one comment that it's from my discussions with Area B Director Brooks Hill of how he sees this, and it was pretty clear to me that he has zero interest on any further contributions for capital improvements. And so this 85-15% split is based on what I heard from him. That's just verbally, so maybe I didn't understand it accurately. Does that continue or does it not continue?
It continues.
So from his perspective, not, and what guarantees do we have from that? Because
There'll be a contract, correct? The 85-15 that we already have.
Yeah, the requisition is operating. The 85-15 is just for operating.
Okay.
The operating deficit is $180,000 projected for 2025. It is split 85-15. It's just operating. That's the deficit, and that's the requisition. So every year, we determine the operating deficit of the airport, and we bill both parties accordingly. On the capital front, we have a reserve. And at that time, if we were to secure a grant and we needed to top up that grant, we would access that capital reserve and we would go to our partner for a contribution separate from the requisition. The requisition is just operating. David Brooks Hill, Area B representative, has also said to me, they're not interested in capital contributions outside what the 2022 report has identified in their development plan. The CSRD has always seen our airport as a regional response facility in the event of a disaster, in the event of emergency preparedness. So it is incumbent on us working with our partner to find a grant that is a reasonable request to share any top-up dollars, but it's outside the 85-15. So the 85-15 doesn't relate to any capital requests. I hope that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah, it does. So I'm just trying to protect, potential future conflict. It almost seems that should either be an agreement that is fleshed out. And just thinking through, we probably should actually have David Brooks Hill here for this discussion. Get it directly from him, from his perspective. The other is, potentially a slight modification to the motion, that a conditional on the same contribution model as existed or something like that. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
In response to that, I should mention to council, in the operating budget, you'll see a capital contribution to capital. So let's say both parties post 2026, 2027 decide, let's put aside $500,000 or $100,000 toward future capital. That would drive up the deficit, and that would be 85-15. So even though my earlier comments were specific to a capital request, it is with our Area B partner a possibility to do a contribution to capital, a reasonable amount, $100,000 a year. $85,000 would be paid by the taxpayers of Revelstoke, $15,000 would be paid by Area B, and that goes into a capital fund to build over time. So it's a little bit of a direct and indirect benefit to have both the CSRD work with us on a capital contribution rather than just asking Area B for an upfront unconditional capital contribution outside the operating part, if that makes any sense. So you'll see in the budget that capital to that contribution to capital does allow Area B to contribute to a fund to basically top up grants in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cherry, you have one last
Yeah, there
comment.
was a comment earlier about this moving too fast. I just want to make sure council's aware this has been in front of us and in front of staff and in front of the Revelstoke Area Economic Development Committee since October of 2024. This has not been moving fast. This has been methodical. It's been quite slow. This came about when I told staff that the Revelstoke fire, what's it called? BC Wildfire Facility wasn't going to be built as what was presented to council. When I went down to Castlegar and found out, it took almost a year and a half before the mayor, before staff, before anybody heard any of this from the CSRD. Without being the owner, we don't have control of the operations. We don't find out about what's going on. We don't have control over safety issues. We don't have control over anything. We just pay the bill. And moving forward, I'd like to have control. I think city council and the city should be in control so the taxpayers aren't overbilled.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Orlando, do you have one comment that you haven't already spoken to?
Sure, absolutely. Just responding as a representative to the Economic Development Commission. The Economic Development Commission once, and I believe twice, was asked by CEO Mr. Parliament to proceed with buying it at those junctures. What the ECDev Commission requested was like a pro forma, other than just a resolution like this saying, let's just go buy it. We need to have some business plan. We need to have some understanding of what we were recommending. We did not receive that after a couple meetings. I think it went on for a year, and that is when we said, okay, let's take this on ourselves. Let's do the look into the business case for this, look into the number. Let's, for example, find out the capital requirements that were not presented to us at any time. So I think I just want to defend the economic development decision and the work that they did. They had a little subcommittee. We met a bunch of times, looked into the numbers, went through the business plan. So I think the delay is that just like I feel right now is we were not presented the information. We were not presented the numbers. And last thing, to extend the analogy of buying the house, it's great that the CSRD is knocking on the door saying, hey, take this on, hey, take this on. If somebody was doing that to you to, buy their house, would you get a building inspector at that point? I think it would be recommended that you do, and that's what we can do. Further to that, Economic Development Commission has been low on staff. We're at about 50% complement now. We do not have a manager or a director position. We've heard from staff that it will be June when we do have one. That would enable that staff member to take a look at this and steward the process. So I'm really excited to see that. But what we needed in front of us is the numbers and a plan. It's not here yet, and we can achieve that through what we have applied for through the Economic Development Commission. I'm not hearing a good justification not to wait for 6 months until we have a better idea of what we're going to be purchasing. And for example, this lack of capital contribution, that needs to be understood as well before we take on something that could cost the taxpayers a lot and not have a good negotiating position to do so.
Yeah, just to, from my perspective, answer the question through the chair of why now? Why not wait 6 months? Because we're bleeding money is my answer. The quicker that there was a lot of low-hanging fruit that was identified at the beginning of this process when we first started hearing about this. Will that stop 100% of the bleed of money? Probably not. It will stop a portion. The longer we wait, the more taxpayers are paying for something that they're getting absolutely no benefit of. And that's not even talking about any changes. That's like any significant changes. It's not talking about improvements. It's talking about basic management that it isn't being done right now, and we have no authority to do it. I've yet to hear, it's more to the point, I've yet to hear a point of why not to do it now, or why not to do it at all. If we did nothing, if we sat on the airport and did nothing, which is exactly what is being done now, we would lose exactly nothing other than the $10 we spent to purchase it. We are still paying the bills. there's yet to be an argument why not to purchase the airport. There's not even a reason to show caution. Yes, should we have business plans? Should we have master plans? Yes, but we have to make those anyway. There's no reason not to own it while we make those, so that we know that when those plans come forward, we receive no pushback on implementing those changes. We own the asset, keep the same. And I don't like the analogy of it being to buy a house. We already own the house. We just don't own it. We're paying for it. It doesn't make any sense to be paying a bill that we're not receiving any benefit. I think that's my last comment on the situation.
Good. All right, Mr. Devlin, thank you. I'm going to support this motion. I look at this sort of thing and go, things that Councilor Lamb was talking about, $10 million deficit and whatnot, that's all if it was going to be built out in a certain way. This is an airport that will probably have to remain VFR instead of IFR because of our where our landing, we're 5 or 15 degrees off or whatever over that waterway and our mountains and that sort of thing. I think there's potential to move this forward. Once we have ownership, we can look at better management models and be able to actually account for ownership in a positive way. So I'm supporting this. I don't believe it's the cart before the horse. I think it's going to give us the value to look at where we can go from here, even if it stayed the same way as it is now, with increased management and looking at enhancements of what we already have regarding rents and fuel purchases, that sort of thing. I think that's going to be a benefit. So I'm going to ask one last time. Councilor Palmer, you have a comment, and then I'm going to call.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Souls. For all the foregoing, we'll go through it again. I agree with the whole principle of the transferring and taking over the ownership. As I've already expressed concerns about what that actually looks like. So based on that, I am putting an amending motion that on the first that clause would be adding subject to review and adoption of the purchase terms and conditions.
So read the full thing out with your amended for the public and for me for clarity.
Right. Okay. So right now the motion on the table is that the full transfer of Revelstoke Airport ownership from the Columbia Shoe Shop Regional District to the City of Revelstoke be formally endorsed, and then the amending motion is subject to the review and adoption of the purchase terms and conditions. And then the rest of the motion is already stated.
So when you say subject to the purchase terms, and where are those terms coming from? The agreement between CSRD and the city?
Yes, yeah, we haven't seen them.
So that's an amending motion that you want to put on the table?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder for that, Councillor Staphenhurst? Any discussion on that amendment?
Yeah, so just, I have faith, reasonable faith that they'll go through well. There's good discussions happening at the staff to staff level. However, I think that this is prudent for council to know exactly what we're agreeing to. And that's alluding to those items about the capital items. So just having that. So what does this mean? And I think that's important for the area B director, because I'm not sure that we're on the same page.
Good. I appreciate that comment. Any other comments on the amendment, the amending motion? Saying no, Councillor Cherry.
Yeah, if Mr. Parliament could tell us what are the conditions?
Through the chair, I understand the amendment. Really, you're asking for, we need to see the offer sheet before we sign off. It's like an offer sheet, like a real estate offer sheet. The purchase terms and conditions, exactly what are we buying? What are the terms and conditions? I don't have a problem with that. I know John wouldn't from the CSRD. I believe that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cherry?
If I can we put a timeline on that so that it's done before it comes to the CSRD vote?
Mayor Souls, I'm fine. In fact, I always encourage time constraints. However, this is already has time constraints on the June 18th with the CSRD.
And they're going to see this motion and I will talk to it. So, yeah, yep. So I'm okay with this. All right, any other comments on the amending motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Orlando's opposed, balance of council is in favor. Now I need to go back to the original motion
As amended.
as amended. So I'm going to call the question on the original motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Orlando's opposed, balance of council is in favor. This motion passes. All right, do we need to take a couple minute break? We're going to go into short-term rentals.
Yes.
Yeah, long one, it's probably smart.
Okay, Ms. Delasal, if you could put the notice up, we'll take a few minute break and then come back.
Certainly.
Thank you. Ms. Dallas, let me know when you're ready.
Certainly, one moment. We are live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. All right, council, we're on to item 11B, short-term rentals. Mr. Simon, do you have a presentation or an overview for us? I believe you have your consultant here as well.
Through your worship, yes, we do have our consultant for the economic housing impact analysis that was completed online. Should council have any questions for them? And we do have a presentation for council if you wish to hear it.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, council. So I'm here today to present on the short-term rental project that has been ongoing since about February 2025, so just over a year. So I'll give a high-level overview of some background information, get into a summary of the policy options for council consideration today, give a high-level review of the economic and housing impact analysis that was completed that is included as an attachment to the report, and then conclude with the staff recommendation. So in April 2022, that's when we amended city zoning bylaw, business license bylaw regulations to implement our current framework for short-term rental management within the community. In October 2023, the province passed Bill 35, which gave new tools to municipalities, as well as this ability for us to opt into a principal residence requirement that council has heard me talk about at length, I think, for the last couple of years now. February 2025 is when we kicked off the current short-term rental project that is presented to you today. From that project, since that time, we've had 5 council and committee of the whole report updates, not including today, 2 public surveys with a total of 843 responses, 5 advisory planning commission workshops, and 5 interactive community engagement sessions. In addition, we've also met with targeted stakeholder groups, including the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Revelstoke Accommodation Association. Just high-level overview, give council some statistics. These have been presented at our public engagement sessions and presented to council previously. If you look at the current lay of the land, we have about 726 units that are eligible to be used as a short-term rental in the community, with 625 of those being eligible as whole home rentals, so no need for a principal resident on site. We had about 4,200, 4,250 dwellings in the city right now. So it means about 17% of all dwelling units in the city are eligible to be used as a short-term rental. When you get rid of some of the key CD zones, the comprehensive development zones, the resort, Mackenzie Village, this goes down to about 5% of all dwelling units are eligible to be used as a short-term rental. And the next logical question is, well, how many are actually operating? So right now we got about 305 licenses issued for short-term rental and bed and breakfast. So that equates to about 11.5% of all dwelling units are operating as short-term rentals. Now, again, we got some high density in the Mackenzie Village area, as well as Revelstoke Mountain Resort area. If you remove those, we're down to 78 licenses issued. So about 2% of all dwelling units in the city. So it just gives council the lay of the land of where we currently sit.
If I can.
Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarification, that's 78 units through the chair. Is that both STRs and bed and breakfasts? And if so, what are the numbers of each?
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry, yes, it would be both. And I believe we are at 37 licenses issued for bed and breakfast currently. So 78 minus 37, making me do math on the spot, 41 short-term rentals.
So there's 41 short-term rentals, and so less than 1%.
Not including comprehensive development zones, which we do see a lot of our higher density within those CD zones. So important to note there.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, all good. And through your worship, if council has any questions, I just want to note right off the bat too, it's a dense report. There's 2 very dense attachments with this. So I appreciate that council will have various questions, and that is also why I made sure we had our economic and housing impact analysis consultant online. So council, you've heard me talk before about 3 policy options that we have unpacked for short-term rental regulations. One thing before we get into each specific policy option, these are the standard rules that would apply under any scenario. So we'd be looking at merging the bed and breakfast and short-term rental definition into one new use. It would be permitted on a lot with a single detached dwelling. So again, it wouldn't be permitted in multi-unit dwellings or duplexes. You'd be allowed to rent out a portion of your dwelling while living there. So classic B&B, or you'd be able to rent out an accessory dwelling unit. Could be a secondary suite, garden suite, or a carriage suite. You're restricted to 1 short-term rental per lot. You would require 24/7 property management, maybe a person other than the owner. That was something we've heard a lot through the public engagement component. We have recommended setting, council goes with options 1 to 3. Minimum lot size of 750 square meters with a maximum of 3 bedrooms with 2 adults per bedroom and 1 parking space per room requirement. For enforcement, one of the recommendations we would have, again, based on public feedback that we received, is that we implement a 3-strike rule. So whether that be a formal warning or a ticket that is issued, if you have 3 separate instances where there are non-compliances that are founded, we would essentially facilitate a process where within 30 days your license is brought before council, and an individual could appeal the decision, but staff would be recommending to rescind the license for a period of a year. You are required to execute a good neighbor agreement and advertise your license as well as your minimum number of parking spaces. We, under options 1, 2, and 3, would be recommending a principal owner requirement. So this would have to be the registered owner of the property residing on the lot as their principal residence, the place that they spend the majority of time. Properties held in numbered companies would not be eligible, and only 1 principal residence would be allowed to be declared per joint owners. So trying to close as many of those loopholes as possible should council decide to go with options 1, 2, or 3. Some other considerations: existing comprehensive development zones. When you really look at the history of short-term rental in Revelstoke, it's been evolving over the last 15, 20 years now. We've created a lot of site-specific rules scattered throughout the community, a lot of them being in the form of comprehensive development zones. It becomes real tricky to start to unwind those and try and get them into conformance with the rules for standard areas throughout the community. So staff would be recommending that in general, the CD zones operate as is, notwithstanding them being subject to the 3-strike rule as well as advertising requirements. One of the key things here is advertising your minimum number of parking spaces. We've heard that a lot through this process, that, you know, someone has 1 parking space dedicated to them, and then all of a sudden they got 4 cars that show up. Where do those cars go? You should be advertising your minimum number of parking spaces. Under standard zoning, 2-unit dwellings, multi-unit dwellings would not be permitted to operate short-term rental, so only within the comprehensive development zones that permit it. Existing spot zones, so again, the city went through a process 2014-ish to 2017-ish, where we were doing spot zoning, so on an individual case-by-case basis, allowing single-family dwellings to be used as whole home short-term rentals without any principal resident requirement. Those are recommended to be remained based on prior conversations with council. And existing licenses, you can imagine when you get into the nitty-gritty of this, various staff interpretations over the years that may have resulted in inconsistent administration of business licensing. Staff would not be recommending to rescind any of those licenses, allow them to operate as is, but if they cease operation, then they're required to come into compliance with the new regulations. So now that that's out of the way, getting into a high-level overview of the different policy options. So option 1, this would be allow short-term rental citywide in low-density areas subject to those conditions of use, predominantly in the RLD1 and LD7 zones, being our standard residential and our standard rural residential zone. We anticipate this would result in, keep in mind, this is as much of an art as it is a science, about 211 additional STRs kind of over the medium term that 3 to 5 year range could potentially result under this policy option. Some of the key things we heard from this and from staff's perspective as well, this option could be a great mortgage helper for people and could create a more equitable baseline for short-term rental rules. However, one of the big things we heard from this as well is the potential to exacerbate costs in an already constrained housing market that is more and more out of reach for average individuals. Option 2, and the map here kind of gives an idea of areas that we could examine. Now, keep in mind, this isn't 100% set in stone because this option would be looking at a location basis. So that standard zoning approach. Here's the areas in the city where we allow principal resident occupied short-term rentals. Kind of similar to what we're doing now. So you can think of it as almost an expansion of what we're doing and seeing these new rules applied further in the community. So this would go to specific areas. We anticipate about 60 additional STRs, but this would be highly variable depending on the ultimate area that council decides is suitable for this use. And again, similar, it adds for a mortgage helper and would be a bit more of a measured approach to reduce the risk of proliferation of STR in the community. But one of the things that we did hear from this option in the community is that it really would be perceived as inequitable. It could increase costs in specific areas, and it could also increase nuisance impacts in specific areas by seeing them concentrated. Option 3 would be very similar as option 1, citywide, but with a cap. And the recommended cap that we've based the analysis off of would be 150. Again, that can change based on council direction, but this would equate to about 4% of all dwellings in the city. So almost a doubling of what we have right now. So an additional 72 STR licenses could be issued. And again, it's a mortgage helper, allows for more control over how many licenses we're issuing in the city. But again, it could be perceived as inequitable. Some of the things we heard is that it could incentivize hoarding of licenses, as well as challenges with administering the cap. There would certainly be potential for user error in administering a cap system with the city.
Mr. Simon, can I just get you to clarify hoarding of licenses? What do you mean by that?
So some of the feedback that we heard from the community is if you are subject to a cap and you get a license and you're in that cap and then the city hits the 150, even if you're not operating, you might choose to hold on to your license for the perception of not losing it, as well as some of the feedback we heard is that people think that it could increase property values. That's maybe a little subjective, but.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Of course. So policy option number 4, and this is not something that has been presented to council previously. As we undertook this project, we always knew one of the options would be keep our existing framework. So think of policy option 4 as kind of formalizing that. Some of the feedback we did hear extensively throughout the process is that the existing framework is working relatively well. It is reflective of historical decisions that have been made in Revelstoke, as well as identifying areas that are suitable for this particular use. So basically, if council did want to keep status quo, we would recommend, however, that the 3-strike rule be implemented. That was something that we heard loud and clear from the community, as well as advertising minimum number of parking spaces. So amendments to business licensing bylaw, municipal ticketing information bylaw, as well as other enforcement bylaws. We would be recommending to amend policy DS23, which is the city's short-term rental policy. This policy does need to be amended to reflect whatever direction council provides. Staff need direction on how often we're going to be reviewing short-term rental. It is an incredibly resource-intensive undertaking to update short-term rental regulations, and it is something that is not easy and does create potential conflict within the community, as well as viewpoints are incredibly variable on this particular topic within a resort municipality. We would also want that policy to be amended so that this provincial principal residence requirement, there's direction for this council and future councils and staff. If we ever are going to explore opting into that, what are the items that we should be considering so that there's certainty for the community about how that decision would ultimately be made, as well as stipulating requirements for future short-term rental reviews.
Councilor Palmer, you have the
Yeah, just a quick question on option 4. So staying within the existing framework, can you just remind us where we are right now with what used to be B&Bs, traditional B&Bs in the residential areas? Is that framework still exist or not?
Through your worship, Councillor Palmer, yes, that framework does exist. So you're testing my memory on when we amended the regulations for B&B. I believe it was around the 2010, 2012 mark. It was considered an accessory use prior to that, and then the city formalized it through a B&B use. So B&B is permitted in low density areas of the city, so the LD1, LD7 zones, and it's only permitted within a single detached dwelling. We would not be recommending any changes to that. So that would still be an option for individuals. And just clarity for anyone who may be listening online, short-term rental is out of a separate self-contained dwelling unit. It could be an ADU, secondary suite, etc. B&B is you are sharing your home and bedrooms in your home with occupants that are traveling.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the 3-strike rule?
Certainly. Through your worship, Councillor Stapers, if I may. We've worked with our bylaw group, and we would still have some granular level details we'd have to sort out on implementation to make sure that it's clear and consistent. But anytime bylaw goes out in 3 separate instances, so it wouldn't be one instance where they issue 3 tickets, that would count as 1 strike essentially. Warnings would count as another strike if the RCMP showed up for a noise complaint, and that's shared with our bylaw team, which usually there's really great communication between the 2 entities. That would also count as another strike. And we would have to flesh out the details further, and we would make sure that any concerns council have are understood. But the way we envision it working right now is that essentially after that 3rd strike occurs, Staff would bring forward a report to council, recommend rescinding license for a year. The individual would be allowed to come to council, and whether it's in writing or verbally, that would be council's prerogative, express why they feel their license should not be suspended for a period of a year. It's the timelines that we're contemplating right now, so that council ultimately makes a final decision. We want staff to not be in that business of making that discretionary call. We want council to be the final decision maker.
Okay, I got a bit of a speakers list here, so statements, I'll get you to go, Council. Cherry and Devlin.
I'm just trying to better understand what are some of the common complaints that we're seeing that would have bylaw called out. I mean, arguably I could say, well, Paul's running an STR out of his house, so I'm just going to keep on calling. STR will show up, or bylaw will show up 3 times, and now you're out, right?
Through your worship, Councillor Stapenhurst, our bylaw officers are quite good at understanding when something is a neighborly dispute and when there's a genuine founded bylaw concern. So it would only be in circumstances where there is a founded bylaw concern, which means a non-compliance with their issued business license, or it could be not having a business license at all, in which case we would proceed immediately to ticketing and further enforcement. We hear noise, parking issues, and as well as individuals not complying with the conditions of use on their business license requirements for advertising, indicating your number of bedrooms in alignment with your parking requirements. Mr. Gibbs may have, if I've missed anything, he can let me know, but I believe that kind of gives a overall summary.
Yeah, Your Worship. It high level, it is essentially noise, parking, and then conditions of use. Those are the top primary items that we do see in relation to enforcement on STRs.
And then, so I know they have a list, but I just want to bring up further to Councilor Staveners. So I've had in my neighborhood where it's been 6 a.m, the owner of the bed and breakfast is not aware that their guests are up, and all of a sudden they're firing up snowmobiles and racing them up the street, or in their words, oh, we're just loading them. No basis for, even though that's a neighborhood complaint, how do you control that as a short-term rental owners?
To your worship, the owners and the operators are responsible for the occupants that are there. So let's say in that circumstance, if it's a violation of our noise control bylaw, then that could be used as a strike. And if we got to 3, then it would come to council. And the big reason, and Mr. Gibson and I had a really good chat about it this morning, so why we want council to make the decision. If it's on staff to figure out those discretionary areas where it's, oh yeah, okay, that was one bad apple that you had staying there and you found ways to rectify it, that creates potential inconsistency and stuff that's kind of done behind closed doors and making a decision whether the license should continue to operate. Having it come to council, that gives council the ability to apply that discretion where, in my opinion, it's probably not appropriate to lie with staff because you're going to get more inconsistency, and these individuals should be relying upon their democratically elected officials to figure out where those gray areas are that a couple instances happened, it wasn't their fault. Maybe we give them a 6-month probationary period, something along those lines, right?
Okay, thanks for clarification. So Councilor Staveners, do you have follow-up on this issue? Otherwise, I'll go around the table for other councils.
No, I don't think so. I would probably just try to figure out how this would correlate to any other long-term management of an apartment building. Do we impose any kind of penalties for an absentee landlord that's hosting 12 foreign workers living in the residence, and they're destroying the fabric of that neighborhood. Are we enforcing any of those regulations for long-term renters in the same manner that we're enforcing short-term rentals?
Through your worship to Councillor Stapenhurst, any enforcement of other uses in the bylaw, notwithstanding some specific items like parking, are generally done on a reactive basis. Short-term rental is one of the few ones, given the sensitivity around this particular topic in town, that we enforce on a proactive basis. So you do see, admittedly, extra attention paid to short-term rentals to ensure compliance. We are in a resort town that is dealing with ever escalating housing challenges, and short-term rentals, rightfully or wrongly, are sometimes viewed as a potential scapegoat for those issues, but they do have an impact, and they do have an impact on the fabric of the neighborhood. And I think from staff's perspective, making sure we're proactive and on top of this, it might not seem like the biggest issue today, but in 10 years, 20 years, when we set that kind of culture for this type of activity in the community, we will maintain the fabric of our long-term occupancy or neighborhoods. That's really the intent here in trying to achieve it by that proactive enforcement. But I can completely appreciate long-term housing and multiple tenants within a rental building. That can certainly exasperate parking, noise, other nuisance issues within neighborhoods. And that's something we've heard many times through this process as well.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I can hold my question comment to the end of the report. I think we're fairly close to that. It might be better.
Councilor Chair?
My question was asked and answered.
Okay, good. Councilor Dillon?
Yeah, I was going to also hold it till the end, but I'll jump on it just because it's kind of relevant to the conversation now. Maybe this isn't a thing that you've fleshed out because this is clearly a high level overview, and I'm just vaguely curious as to if it's been given any thought. So 3-strike rule, if somebody were to say get 3 strikes and have their license suspended, if they were a legal non-conforming property, would that therefore stop them from therefore being able to do that? Or would that be like, that would be an exception and then they could come back? Again, maybe it's not fully thought out or maybe it could go either way, but I am just kind of curious.
The spot zones?
No, the legal non-conforming, like people who have done it and not had to stop because they've just never stopped. Therefore, if their license was revoked, they'd have to stop. And would then they be able to start again is the question.
If I may, through your
Yes,
worship,
please.
Councilor Devlin. Very good question. And I could envision a scenario where a license was issued 10 years ago that may not comply with current rules. But again, I think council's been clear and staff have been clear with the community. We're not going to pull the rug out from under you. As long as you don't cease operation, then you can continue to operate. We will renew your license on an annual basis. In that circumstance, if they had a 3-strike rule and their license was rescinded for a period of a year, would they then lose that non-conforming status? That is a very important piece that I think within a council policy, a bylaw isn't appropriate because you put it into a bylaw, you're superseding provincial legislation. But a council policy for direction on those, this is exactly the type of feedback that we really like getting because then it makes us set rules that are clear for the community.
And as far as I know, there aren't a lot of properties that would even comply. It was a thought experiment that I was kind of just the one question is, if someone has enough strikes, do you really think they should continue to do it?
And that's where, again, we want it to come to council because those are decisions that council can ultimately consider that are sometimes outside the discretion that staff get.
Great. Okay, anyone else before we carry on? Carry on, Mr. Son.
So only a couple more slides left. And again, I have Mr. Jamie Van Struth, who is with Deloitte, who was incredibly instrumental in supporting us with the economic and housing impact analysis online. Just real high level, this is pulled from the report. And one thing too, I will say the report you guys have, these tables have been updated ever so slightly only for the title of scenario 4. We updated it just to say provincial principal resident requirement, not to confuse scenario 4 with policy option 4 in the staff report. We wanted to make that abundantly clear. So scenario 4 that you're seeing here, it's relabeled in the formal attachment. I just neglected to update my presentation. It is relabeled to say provincial principal residence requirement. And if it isn't, the one that's posted on Talk Revelstoke is.
Okay.
So we wanted to make abundantly clear for the public and council that whenever it's referring to scenario 4 here, it's not talking about policy option 4 in the corresponding staff report.
Say status quo is expensive.
Yes, very much so. So just real high level, council can see, scenarios 1, 2, and 3, it correlates with the expected number of increased STR units that there would be in the community. So you can see anywhere between 2.9 million and 10.3 million in additional local spending impact within the community. And for city revenue, MRDT somewhere between $40,000 and $140,000 a year. City business licensing fees somewhere between $45,000 and $160,000 annually, depending on uptick, of course. If we did opt into the provincial principal residence requirement, and again, providing clarity, a lot of moving pieces with this project, we know that council has not given that direction, but as we were completing this economic housing impact analysis to ensure we have good objective information for the community should questions arise, we wanted to unpack what it would look like if we did opt in, so that council and the community have all the objective information that they need on this topic. So it would have a drastic impact on economic activity related to short-term rentals in the community. Estimated immediate impact until things are offset with people finding alternative accommodation in town, close to $20 million in local economic impact. So that would be the immediate impact, somewhat subsiding to, I believe, around the $10 million range, 8 to 10 within that medium term, 3 to 5 years. So you can see that in the table here to the right, where it indicates 8.2 million. And you can see we would have drastic reduction annually, about $250,000 a year in MRDT, stabilizing about $110,000 a year as the individuals traveling to Revelstoke sort out their accommodation needs. And then short-term rental fees, they're going to go down about $295,000 a year.
So can I ask a question? You're talking about losing money, staying at status quo. I'm looking at it as not gaining money, staying at status quo. So when the public sees this, like we're losing 19 million to stay at status quo, that's kind of dependent on the potential of new tourists coming to the community. So my question to you, am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't want to say for clarity. It's a typo on what we're looking at.
Okay, all right. So I just want to carry on with the question. So did we evaluate, and Mr. Van Struth might know this better, if we stayed the same and we've had 2 or 3 hotels come to you saying, hey, I'm going to build here, and they've never built. And all of a sudden now they're going, we can build. We're still looking at building up our housing stock for our community. Are we losing money? Have we evaluated that sort of thing? Or am I so far off track that even if we were going to start building hotels, we're 5 years out before we see fruition on that?
Your Worship, good question. And just to clarify, so scenario 4 here is opting into the provincial principal residence requirement. So it's not status quo. So this would be if council made the decision, said province under Bill 35, we want to opt into the provincial principal residence requirement. Every whole home short-term rental in the community except for the resort is therefore not eligible to operate. What would that immediate impact be? And that's what this column here ultimately shows. That would be the immediate impact. And then this table here on the right shows what the impact would be over the medium term as new hotels potentially operate, as people find alternative accommodation. And there's not so much room in occupancy levels within hotels, but there is some room to absorb the losses that would be seen on the short-term rental side. But we also got to keep in mind, and this is where Mr. Van Struth has done so much work, the spending habits for individuals with short-term rentals are different than spending habits for people with hotels or staying in secondary suites. So there's a lot of different variables, but just to be abundantly clear, the status quo, again, is no change from our current economic benefits or city revenue. This scenario 4 here is the provincial principal residence requirement opting in.
Good. All right. Thanks for the clarity. And then after Councillor Charity's raising his hand, I'm looking at it going, okay, scenario 4, option 4, 2 different things.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going, thank you for that. And thank you for the clarification. So I'll shut up and let you finish.
If I can, though, since we're
he
at
wants
pause,
to weigh in.
I just wanted to prompt Ms. Floyd to update this at the end of the meeting to have the slide show, because the council agenda and what the public is seeing is still the this. This is not what you sent in the email to put out to the public, but.
And through your worship, the report does include a clause as well, the staff report, and I know it's a lengthy staff report, but there's a clause in there that does stipulate as well that policy option 4 did not have economic and housing impacts analyzed on it because it is our status quo.
Right.
So, we're getting about $290,000 a year from short-term rental license revenue, so that would stay the same. Yeah.
Perfect.
So we also unpacked housing impacts, and the way that the housing impacts were looked at is looking at BC stats projections over our dwelling unit need over the next 10 years. Now, again, there's a lot of different ways we can measure dwelling unit need. We had our 2019 housing impact analysis done as part of the OCP, or sorry, it was 2021, I believe. This was looking at the BC stats projections for Revelstoke, and you can think of it as how many dwelling units would we need over the next 10 years on the low and high end? So it's a range, of course. How many would we need under each scenario? So right now, based on BC stats projections, we need somewhere between 70 and 402 dwelling units. If we went with policy option 1, you can see over the next 10 years, those numbers shoot up to between 344 and 676 dwelling units. So there is an impact. And the way that the consulting team had calculated this also accounted for, with the increase in economic activity, that also increases the needs for those employee housing in the community as well. So you can see this row here, additional dwellings needed to accommodate change in workers has also been factored in. So it is quite comprehensive to ensure that we're getting that full picture. So long story short, what this tells us is under options 1 to 3, we are going to need to build more housing because we will not only be losing secondary suite dwelling stock within the community and ADU dwelling stock in the community to short-term rentals. We are also going to increase economic activity, which is a good thing, but that increases our need for worker housing in the community. Cleaners, hot tub repair businesses, furniture, so like all these impacts that result from the short-term rental industry. So this gets to the end of my presentation. The staff recommendation, we are recommending status quo for the time being with some changes to our business licensing bylaw as well as our council policy. Next steps, depending on which option council proceeds with, council has lots of options. They can defer a decision, they can direct staff prepare amendments under option 1, 2, or 3. You can direct us to do more public engagement. So happy to pass it over. But in general, under any option, we get the direction from council today. We draft necessary bylaw amendments. We get legal review if required, bring forward for first reading, schedule public hearing if required. Options 1, 2, and 3 would trigger a public hearing. Option 4 would not trigger a public hearing. City holds the public hearing if required, and then subsequent council consideration of the amending bylaws. And then if it is successful, we will get to work implementing the new bylaws. So that gives you a rough roadmap for what this would look like going forward. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Simon. Questions? Councilor Palmer, do you have a question?
Yeah, lots just sort of spinning in my mind. It's interesting at the start. So okay, we started this officially this stage of the short-term rental in February 2025, about a year and a half ago. Reality is it started a long time ago because even this idea of the previous council and years old did that Thomas Brook area, fringe area, and that was the thought of the council of the day at that time was, is this working or is it not? And it's had its twists and turns as we go on. I was trying to remember, why we made this decision back in February 2025 to go down this path. And I can't remember all that. I don't necessarily even need to know. The problem is this short-term rental thing, we just keep on grinding and grinding and grinding. And one of my hesitations with the recommendation is we grind and grind and grind and then do nothing. That's problematic. Just to comment on the presentation, not the report, but those economic impacts and housing impacts, and being a person that likes the data, it's a little confusing. It's a little confusing, and you've, I think, tried to address that fairly well, but it still continues to be because there's a layer under the provincial or the other way around. It's these layers which are kind of complex to understand. And then, of course, with and with Jamie doing the the crunching, I have confidence that it was good crunching. However, there's so many nuances and so many unknowns, and to be a bit extremist, that could be even saying, okay, well, if we don't have short-term rentals, the Kelowna example, when that all dried up, suddenly their economic activity went down, so you don't need worker housing anymore because there's no jobs for them, kind of thing. And so The, I had some potential questions on some of the nuances of, for the other options, 1, 2, or 3. But I think I'm going to avoid them because I'm not sure if it's going to add clarity. However, I do have one question from a staff perspective. If option 4 was not a consideration, what would staff's recommendation be? I have my own predetermined answer that I'm hoping to hear, but it might not be.
Do you feel comfortable in answering that question? Okay, and the reason I'm asking that, because I don't want you to be pigeonholed into something where staff is now determining what's best. But I think what Councillor Palmer is trying to get at is capacity issues, but if he has something else that he wants to discuss, I'll let him bring that up.
Yeah, maybe I'll just get some clarification. Let's have my answer that I hope to hear. It doesn't mean that that's the right answer or wrong answer. It's just my own bias from starting. So just for clarity. And so in my mind, one of the options that council has is to not go along with the staff recommendation. That's essentially it. And based on all the community consultation, the little nuances that you've heard from us, because arguably, Mayor Souls, with option 4, your staff are possibly in that zone of, trying to interpret where the political will is going and where the concerns are. I hear those same kind of things, so I get it. And yet, we did have one letter, that sort of articulated quite well, actually, that, we gave direction on 1, 2, 3. We've been down that path. And then obviously always there was that 4th option, but that's the context. So say, okay, no, we've made a decision. We're going down the path. Where should we be? So that's the context of that question.
Okay.
Through your worship, Councillor Palmer, if I may.
Sure.
Option 4 became quite important as we did complete public engagement, because we did get a lot of feedback on saying, why are we recommending any changes? So it did become quite important, not only when we really understood the economic and housing implications, but also really hearing from the community that there is still a lot of polarizing views on this topic, right? And a lot of folks we did hear back from said, this is not the right time to be looking at expanding STR allowances in the community. We should be focusing elsewhere on getting housing for locals. I can appreciate that. If option 4 is off the table, and I have to choose between the 3 options in there, it would be option 1 with the strict conditions of use that we have included in there, and strictly from a ease of understanding and ease of interpretation. And this, we didn't receive this direction from council, and it would certainly be contentious with many individuals in the community that would personally be impacted. But if we were redoing this from scratch, it would be starting with almost a blank slate, notwithstanding a few specific areas that are hyper concentrated for short-term rentals, and removing all the one-offs that the city has approved over the last decade. That would be the cleanest, easiest way to administer. Legal implications, our phones ringing off the hooks and spending way more time than we ought to on an issue that is one piece of the puzzle for solving housing in this community. The impact of it is too great to take allowances away from 30 properties that have been granted them in the past. But that would be the easiest path forward from my perspective to ensure consistent rules and ease of understanding the rules. In an ideal world, we have 2 sets of rules. These are the rules for a whole home rental, cap your number of bedrooms, all your requirements for advertising. These are the rules for a principal resident occupied STR. Simple as that. But one of the planners that I have a lot of respect for, who's currently supporting Tofino with their short-term rental work right now, one of the conversations we've had is the hardest thing with these short-term rental projects is accounting for the history of them in these communities. And Revelstoke's history is very complex. And as staff, it's easy to say, let's wipe that history out. I think as council, it's a lot harder to say that. So that would be the route that I would go, option 1, and wipe out a bunch of historical allowances. But I know that's not the route that we're going to be going down.
Couple follow-up?
Yeah, thank you for that. And that was my bias in that. So I'm glad that I've had some affirmation that I wasn't way off topic from a staff perspective. In that option one of the things is, although it doesn't wipe out that history, it starts to address that history essentially. And one of the problems I have with option 4 is that whole thing, we spent all this resources and then it's not quite do nothing, because there's actions for sure. But it just, in the controversy with the short-term rentals, it's never going to go away. Never, ever. And then in where we've been in the past with the, more of a crisis on the housing crisis, well, a lot of that's being addressed. That affordable housing is being addressed at 4th Street and other things, the increase of ability for homes to have multiple units and all that kind of thing. So a lot of those issues are already being addressed. And probably have an inclination to go with option 1 over option 4, but I'm certainly interested to hear what others say.
Sure, Councilor Doug.
Yeah, I think just a little comment from my perspective on this, regardless of what option you decide to choose. Maybe I'll talk about my preferences in a minute, but I think, and I kind of struggled with it when I first read this report, days ago, and I looked at it and I thought, and I no offense to staff in this, but it is kind of first instinct to think, okay, so we've done nothing, or that's the recommendation. But I don't really think that's true. After thinking about it for a little, the province made us have to do this. The province put on a lot of rules, and I don't think it would have been necessarily great governance to just, without doing an economic impact study, to just say no. To just say, no, that's not for us. I think we owed it to ourselves and to the people of Revelstoke to look at it. I think that's, even if we, as a council, decide to go with option 4, I think that was important. I do think that, I don't foresee a world where I would personally want to see this reviewed every couple of years as a general rule. Unless, of course, there is massive changes on the province and they continue to go down that route where they're trying to hammer things in. Because I think it is incumbent on municipal governments to look at this, to take that, to unpack it. Does it cost money? Yes. Is that unfortunate? Yes. I said it before, as much as I might be vocal in a general sense against STRs, I don't think the provincial framework is the right way to go either. I've never been pushing for that. I don't think it can't be a one size fits all thing. But I don't think that it was a waste of time and money to do this. I think moving forward into the future, and I believe that's part of the recommendations, is to have, an idea of how often you want to revisit that. I don't see it being an every couple of years kind of thing. I think, every couple terms maybe is the right answer. I don't know if there's maybe tie it to some sort of, once you hit a certain vacancy rate, look at it again. To kind of talk about policy options, I think I agree with you that a lot of the strides this council, and to a degree the last council, has made as well towards housing are coming online, and I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I don't think we're there yet where those needs have been addressed. I think that given 5-ish, 8-ish, somewhere in there years, we might be in a place in Revelstoke where housing is available enough that you could consider opening up SDRs to everybody, and then, the market will sort itself out, but there'll still be vacancy and it'll be a healthy housing market. I can see the same future you see in terms of coming online, but it's not there yet, in my opinion. So at the time, I am, as sad as it is to say, kind of in the sense that, we have spent a lot of time and money on this, but I do think we got a lot of good information. I'm in favor of policy 4 as it stands right now. So that's just my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Councilor Lund.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So it's not really a comment, but just a thought. I chatted with staff before the meeting of perhaps deferring it for a couple weeks. Can continue asking all the questions we want, maybe follow up, get some impact with people. It's not something that's super timely. Like if we wait 2 weeks, it's going to make a huge difference. There's a lot to unpack, including not just options 1, 2, 3, 4, but
maybe tweaking one of them, making some changes, seeking more clarification. It's a pretty complex one. So just want to say I'm not putting that forward, but as the conversation continues, I'd be happy to advance that if people are.
Any other comments or questions around the councillor statements?
Yeah, I think hearing everybody's comments, I think they're well received. I think I kind of torn between staff recommendation option 4 and then option 1. When I look at option 1, hearing Director Simon's comments about the positive economic benefit to our community, the amount of jobs that are being created, such as the service industries, the cleaning industries, the hot tub industries. But I think one of the other industries that we're kind of overlooking with all of this is the construction industry and the ability to kind of create a new, not necessarily create a new, but support the construction industry that we're seeing in our community. And 7 to 402 new houses over 10 years sounds like a lot, but you break it down, I think even 402 houses over 10 years is roughly 70 houses a year. I don't know what we're roughly on track to build right now. And especially as we're seeing a shift within the industries of our community, how are we replacing those well-paying jobs, the trades, the carpenters, the electricians, the plumbers, the roofers. So I think there's potentially an economic, maybe a more robust economic impact that we're not seeing in this presentation. And I welcome any comments from staff about the economic analysis that has been done regarding that.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Van Struth a question regarding that very thing. He's done all of this hard work and come up with these incredible numbers. But so, Mr. Van Struth, when we move forward, depending on which option that we even consider, the housing, the building in the community, and the businesses, as Mr. Simon has spoke to. But then there's that underlying thing where is, from a financial perspective, is having short-term rentals going to be able to assist us with housing for those who need to work in this industry? What I mean by that is, do you think that the construction industry will pick up to make new houses for those workers? And then after that answer, I'm going to actually ask Mr. Simon a question about what we're doing. Does my question make sense at all?
I can answer part of it, at least, I think. We didn't look at the construction impacts. I think the main reason is our focus is what is the annual tourism-related impact of whatever change we're looking at. And the construction impacts, you're right, could be significant under some of these scenarios. It's a one-time impact. We just, for various reasons, decided not to include it in this analysis. Our focus was just the tourism-specific impacts.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that is a little more clear. And then, Mr. Simon, with what the government has said to us, listen, you have 4 units on a single-family lot. How does that look when we're talking about short-term rentals? So I'm going to build a new house. I'm going to have 4 units on it. I'm going to live there. I want to use one of those units now. I know it's multifamily, but does that shut that out where now we're going to have people building single-family units with a suite only instead of doing what the government says to give us more housing?
Your Worship, very good question. A lot of variables to unpack there. You talk to folks in the construction industry right now, building 4 units on a lot, especially in Revelstoke with land costs, it's not economically viable unless you were gifted the land some time ago. They're needing a higher number of total units to make the projects economically viable.
Okay.
If you said for every, lot that you build housing on, 1 unit can be used for short-term rental, is that going to change pro formas so significantly that it now becomes economically viable? In speaking with the construction industry on this topic, there was quite a bit of advocacy for allowing STRs in multifamily housing, and it's a double-edged sword. one could make the argument, if you allowed us to rent out a basement suite in a bunch of row homes that have basement suites with them, the Campfire Development's a really good example. They got 30 row homes there with 30 secondary suites. If you gave flexibility and said you can use the basement suite as long-term or short-term, your prerogative, it might make the projects more desirable from a development perspective. But then are we also creating a situation where we're impacting what otherwise would be the most affordable long-term housing in the community on the market side anyway? So it's this constant double-edged sword where, it almost gets back to what your philosophical belief is. Should traditional homeowners that are building suites and buying units with suites be responsible for supporting long-term accommodation? You see the rent prices for new construction right now. They're quite expensive. Is that enough of a mortgage helper for people in this town? Or should we allow them the opportunity to do short-term rental and see the market work its way out? So that is the way the regulations are structured right now. We weren't proposing to expand multifamily from staff's perspective. The risk is too high to cannibalize what ought to be our most attainable, affordable form of market accommodation in town. But it is certainly an option that if council said, we want to expand this and cap on it, you can only do it in a suite. We want to expand it to multifamily. That is certainly a route that council could go. And there are those in the construction industry that would say, I would pursue more projects in town if I could rent out a suite on a short-term basis. How much that is proven out by their pro formas remains to be seen.
And my concern with that sort of thing is we see the developers coming in from out of the community and then the purchasers coming in from out of the community and nobody sets foot in here other than to rent stuff out. That's my biggest concern going down there. I'm not a developer, don't pretend to be or have the answer, but we're looking at this and as previous councilors have said, there are things that we should be doing now. So I've sat around this table since 2014, 2017. We had 60 some public hearings and we ended up just putting everything in advance and the community loved it because nobody was getting anything done. Drove us crazy. And so previous council, this council has come to a point where I think we're able to move things in a direction forward. Question is, what's the appetite around the table as to where we go? Councilor Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's sort of building on that and the question or the question of does the mortgage help or does that help affordability? And maybe it's incremental, but it helps somebody. It helps somebody whether into home ownership, helps somebody, for whether it's a person's wise to do a short-term rental as opposed to a suite. Well, the short-term rental is just a massive amount more work for those individuals. The question I have, and just for qualifying, and there may be nothing there, but anecdotally, there's a lot of shared housing, and whether that's long-term ish or seasonal or something shorter, that sort of loophole kind of thing of shared housing. Do we have any sense of how big that is? And anecdotally, again, when I look at the number of shared houses that I see, it's pretty significant.
Go ahead, because I was going to ask a similar question, so go for it.
Through your worship, Councillor Palmer, we are a growing resort municipality and quantifying that is incredibly challenging. I will say though, we have $50,000 set aside as identified in our tactical plan for OAP fund use to try and quantify as best as we can exactly that type of scenario, trying to better understand. We don't get CMHC data as a community under 10,000 on paper. So we don't get vacancy data. We don't get good stats from CMHC. And even when we do our housing needs reports, following the province's prescriptive methodology, it's pulling data from the region and not specific to Revelstoke. So I'm hoping we can find a really good consultant who understands this stuff quite well to help us unpack what are our needs going forward in the next 10, 20 years, employee accommodation, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, seniors accommodation. What is our need for workers right now? And we need to understand how underhoused are we right now? This is the real challenge in Revelstoke. When are we going to hit our demand? we keep building purpose-built rental, we keep seeing more development come online, but there seems to be this insatiable appetite where it does keep moving. A lot of communities have slowed down. We're still seeing a lot of development in Revelstoke. When are we going to hit that bottom or that baseline level that we don't have 10 individuals that are sharing a home because that's their only option? Well, maybe it's more of a preference thing because we have enough 1-bedroom studios, 2 bedrooms in the community. That is very challenging to quantify. We are going to try this year using OAP funds. But again, it's as much of an art as it is a science. So it gives you that plus minus 10, 20%.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to quantify. Mayor Souls, I'm assuming you get the daughter of a friend that's just going to be stopping by and wants to stay in Revelstoke. Like, how often do I get that? And I would love more short-term rentals, so it's easier to say no of that friend of a friend that is essentially couch surfing. Part of option one is this affordability, the incremental affordability. That's why I'm slightly leaning towards option one, because with the principal owner requirement, it's benefiting just that homeowner. It's not the big developers. And so you could say, okay, well, short-term rental, if we have a new hotel, it's going to come in, we'll be all over it. That is short-term rentals, and it's corporate interests that go wherever kind of thing. And so whereas this, it's incrementally helping the potential for options for individuals kind of on that.
Councilor Stevenson and Councilor Cherry.
Yeah, thank you. Question, we're talking about OAPs, and that's the funds that are derived from short-term rentals that go towards affordable housing, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So under scenario one, how much revenue would be projected potentially did we do a financial modeling for 1 to 10 years under the different scenarios using the OAP funds, and then what could that fund in regards to affordable housing, and looking at that business model? I'm not sure. Maybe the answer is in the report, or maybe I'm missing something. But
just for clarification, in option one, scenario one, because.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm using terms.
No, just for, if you could contextualize that, because I'm still struggling with that thing.
Okay, so option one.
Through your worship to Councillor Staplener, so under option one, or identified as scenario one in the table of the economic housing impact analysis, you'd be looking at $140,000 a year in extra MRDT revenue.
How much again, sorry?
$140,000 annually. And again, think of that over the medium term, and that's if there's enough uptick, and that's based on 211 additional STRs in the community.
How much money do we get a year now? OAP.
To your worship, I believe, and Mr. Parliament can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're around $2 million a year now in MRDT revenue.
Just under.
Okay. Councilor Cherry.
Thanks. I'm going to be on the side of Orlando on this one. I'm deferring decision to a later meeting, but I'm happy to have the discussion, ask some questions now. This is huge with overlasting impacts. I'll make a quick statement before you even ask questions. STRs have been viewed as a license to print money. It's been that way for 10 years. Everybody in this room knows that's untrue. So I'd push back on saying it's a mortgage helper. Especially when you're applying for a mortgage, you don't get to look at potential income. They look at your actual. Well, I'm not. I got lots more though. Save it. There's tons. You'll have a few written down.
I'll let you finish.
Trust me, you'll have a few more. To quickly, so he loses his thought. Can you, Mr. Simon, let council know what 750 square meters would be per standard lot size in feet, just for everybody to understand. Because I think that is going to be a potential contentious issue that people haven't realized yet.
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry, 750 is about 8,000 square foot lot. So
how's your math? 50 by 162? Sound about right?
Somewhere in that vicinity. I'd have to confirm calculations. Just under a quarter acre. Quarter acre is about 930 square meters.
Okay, so my comment for asking that question is related to this. That right there is an equity across the board for policy one. That eliminates
Most.
half, 2/3 of the town right there, all of the downtown core, unless there's some large existing lots where they've incorporated the side lots and houses, etc. So that wasn't exactly my intent on option policy one, and I don't think that was properly outlaid to the public in that scenario, which is unfortunate. I should have caught it earlier. Sorry.
Through your worship, Councillor Cherry. So when we went out to the public, we talked about high level scenario 1, 2, 3, policy option 1, 2, 3, get feedback on which option they felt was best. If we would have delved into specific conditions of use through that level of public engagement, we wouldn't have gotten past the minimum number of parking spaces that are required per bedroom. We wouldn't have gotten past the minimum number of bedrooms. After we got that high level feedback, public tells us the what, we come back, we draft regulations to implement that what, say the how. Council reviews, that would be subject to a public hearing. If the public shows up and says that lot size doesn't make sense, we have reasons why we chose that lot size. If we go smaller, if we say no minimum lot size, it's hard to put the lid back on rather than improving flexibility in the future. So it's kind of that philosophy of starting low and going slow. If we need to make tweaks and changes later, are we going to get 24 variance applications in the first year if that's the route we went? And some of the feedback that we heard from the community is this use can generate nuisance impacts. How are you going to mitigate that? And we did get a lot of feedback that did talk about lot size that's detailed in the public engagement summary. And so that's where we took all that feedback from the community and said, okay, what makes sense for conditions of use? You're never going to get it 100% right. And it gets subjective, there's varying opinions on it, but staff landed somewhere that if council chooses to go options 1, 2, and 3, those conditions of use are intended to keep a lid on excessive proliferation. Now, keep in mind, the only use that would be eligible right now is single family homes, already our least attainable housing product in the community. This will put a premium on it. Make no mistake. And especially with the lot size, it puts premium on that big lot. But is that worth mitigating the impact on our most attainable form of housing, multi-unit? And from staff's perspective, yes, that needs to be reserved full stop for long-term residents in this community.
If I go on, reading the 119-page report for the survey, thanks for making that summarized. Yeah. It is very apparent that a lot of the community didn't catch the 750 square meter size. Also that they don't understand the parking requirements that are already in place for STRs, because that was the number one issue. Another comment I have is just regards to policy one. When I was pushing policy one, the goal was to create more housing. It was to create long-term rentals as a condition for an STR, help create ADUs, and help push the construction industry and the renovation industry in this town in a time when we're going through more than just global and regional economic uncertainty. Unfortunately, I don't think this is all has worked out exactly how I'd hoped, but happy to continue the conversation.
Okay, so I'd like to go to Councillor Stapeners from Councillor Palmer, and I'm going to come back to you because I'm going to have
Just a question for Councillor Cherry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I see that you're leading to sort of delaying the decision.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of where you're leaning towards?
At this point, I'm leaning towards option 4, with careful consideration for option 1.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Stapeners.
Yeah, I think it's going back almost 10 years ago when I was looking at an investment property that was short-term rental only. Speaking to the mortgage brokers at that time, they won't lend to you based on short-term rental income. And I think given given what we've seen provincially with the uncertainty as to what, I don't think banks have changed those rules. So that was my comment regarding that.
Is that the mortgage helper?
Yeah, the mortgage helper. I think one of the things that I struggle with housing is the fact that we have a policy. It's great. We have bylaw that'll come out in the middle of the night, or maybe RCMP officers, but we don't offer any assistance for long-term renters or landlords that are facing the same obstacles. And you look at the provincial system and how broken it is on getting people into housing or out of housing, whatever the case may be. So I struggle with a decision around a council table that mandates the use of a housing. And we don't really offer any assistance when we say you have to do long-term housing. Well, I got this problem, I got this tenant, there's a problem.
Yeah, and I think,
Right.
you know, we almost can't, well, we're not mandated by the provincial government. We can't basically say, we're gonna go in. I'm gonna phone Kenny up and say, send bylaw down there and kick these guys out because you're not paying the rent. You haven't paid rent for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at that sort of thing, the police are gonna go like, whoa, we're not doing it.
Mhm.
And he's looking at me going like, yeah, don't answer the phone when he calls again, right? You look at that sort of thing, rightfully so. I don't know whether there's an answer to what you're saying as to how we move forward. But here's a question I have for all of you. I mean, it's getting long in the day. 2 of you want to defer this for a couple weeks, and my question is, what's the purpose? Where are we going to be in 2 weeks' time? In that time frame, are we going to be able to work with staff to amend option 1 or come up with another scenario that's going to work for council? Or are we just going to end up where now we've upset the community who weighed in, we've done all this work. I want to actually come to something that's going to work for the betterment of the community. And I'm just asking, can you give me some input? Nope.
I mean, if I was to answer your question, I'd love to work with staff to modify option 1, but that's obviously if that's what council was leaning towards. Otherwise, you know, we modify option 1 and all of a sudden you go to vote on it and everybody's like, no, like we're leaning towards option 4. So.
And that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
It's like, where do we go? Council Palmer, you want to wait?
It's an interesting question because the reality is, if we make a decision, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are mad at us. Doesn't matter what the decision is, there'll be a whole bunch of people mad. If we delay the decision and then make a decision, there's going to be even more people mad. It'll become an election issue. So that's, or if we just delay it, and say, well, we couldn't figure that out and give it to the next council. Well, that doesn't look very good on this council.
No,
As far as this
and
is-
so, you know, that's kind of the whole thing, is that they're trying to come to a resolution that's going to be best. So, you know, it's not just those who are engaged that we need to be considering. It's those in the community who didn't weigh in, who didn't tell us what they want because they're going, I elected those guys to make a decision. I'm thinking they're going to make the decision in the best interests of our community. So my question to you as a group, what would be the purpose in delay? What, you know, for 2 weeks or a month or whatever? And then are we going to be getting any further ahead? Or are we better to say, let's opt for option 4 once we reach a certain housing criteria, next council can look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm asking. Councilor Tibbner, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with option 4, it's always, it kind of goes to the you know, what's our goal? What's our vacancy rate? What are we looking for? Are we trying to, you know, and then what else are we going to do to help spur development of housing? Because, you know,
I mean, our vacancy rate's like 20% this month. It'll be back to 0 in a month.
Yeah, sorry to slightly derail the conversation, but I just figured I would answer the previous question because I've looked it up now. The MRDT that we receive or is budgeted for 2026 is 2.1 million, 270,000 OAP. So I don't believe that the report took into account specific OAP versus MRDT. It's just general MRDT, but so you're looking at 140,000. General MRDT, assuming at a 10%, which is, you know, dirty math, you know, you're looking at another 14 grand per year.
and that's growing every year. year over year?
The OIP is fairly stable because it's a relatively small pot comparative to MRDP. It does obviously grow slightly in proportion. There was a big jump when they switched over to Area B and going to 3%. There was quite a large jump, but it's kind of stabilized since then.
And then CSRD is sort of uncertain as to what they're doing with it.
CSRD, exactly. So that was a big portion of the OAP, so that the OAP may very well be kind of diminishing quite drying up. But just the numbers part.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Orlando, then Councillor Chair.
Yeah, Mayor Sills, just to sort of respond to your question, I would be happier not putting option 1, 2, 3, 4 ahead and just waiting for a couple of weeks. Taking the time to ask additional questions of staff, follow up on that. And part of my reasoning is we've already been here for a few hours and we've got things to go, and I feel like maybe we could rush it a bit. And I also, in the past, as we've been explored this, I've seen sort of last minute changes at the table that nobody anticipated. There was one time, I wasn't on council at the time, you could rent upstairs and live downstairs, and then one council member said, no, let's do it the other way around. And I think that ruined the whole intent of the whole plan, and so I'm just leery that if we get into horse trading right now, with at least my blood sugar being a little bit low, that we're gonna make some fundamental error that we haven't thought through. So I just wanna buy a couple weeks to follow up on questions. For example, the 750 square meter, is that already existing as a number, or was that something that staff came up with, which was the question that came up through here?
Through your worship, Councillor Orlando, it's not existing.
Okay.
Staff recommended that based on feedback that we got as part of the public engagement for the project. So that's why it wasn't also presented as part of the public feedback, because it was crafted based on the feedback we received to try and hit that middle ground.
Yeah. So if I said, okay, I'm on option whatever 2, and then except we're going to change that to no 750 or 350, then you got to think that through. The numbers all change, so I'm just a little bit concerned. I think it would be good if we just had some time to digest a little bit more, given that we spent a year doing it, and given that no matter what we decide, there'll be people who are going to be unhappy with the decision.
Okay, so just a thought process here, just for you guys. I have one councillor going away for a period of time in May. I'm thinking if we bring this back, I'd like to spend an entire meeting dealing with this. Let's just get this done. We start at 1, we go through it, whether it's option 1, 2, 3, 4, or option 22, I don't care. But I think we need to achieve something, or try to achieve something. So I'm asking you as a group, if you feel like, we're time's going on and our attention span is waning on this, are you open to what Councillor Orlando saying, Councillor Chariot said, let's defer it for a period of time, come back. We have our questions. Let's do our questions at the table in the public, even if you ask them of staff prior to, so you kind of have an idea of, how we're going to approach this, or how your thought train's going to go. I'm okay with that, as long as we're not taking away from Mr. Simon and his staff doing their job on other shit that we got to get done. Pardon my language, Mr. Delisle. Strike that comment. Anyway, so I'm just asking around the table, what do you guys feel?
If there was a motion for deferral, whatever that looks like, I'm open to it. I'd like to just the nuances of what that actually is, but I'm open to that.
Okay, someone want to make that one, Councillor Orlando?
I move to defer the item to, and sorry, were you saying there's people away in May? So
yeah, I'm thinking June. Would that work?
Don't put it around me, because I'll try and
Listen, we've got other things that we are going to be dealing with in May. We've got 2 meetings in May? 2
yeah. First meeting in June?
Maybe the first meeting in June.
Silga. Or sorry, FCM.
SCM.
We'll be
Okay,
short-staffed.
You're away and staff are away.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's gonna be somebody away all summer.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna be.
Well, let's go to the second meeting in June, if you're okay with that. What date is that?
23rd.
23rd?
Do you want to do it in off weeks so that we don't delay
We do a
anything else
special
coming to council?
Yeah, let's do it in an off week.
So that'd be the 16th. Or 30th.
Yeah, 30th, we're getting into Canada Day stuff, and I know that I'm gonna be busy doing this stuff. So the 16th, we have nothing on that day. Am I correct? Ms. Floyd with other committees and stuff?
As far as I know, that is correct.
Okay, so why don't we set it for 16th of June? Does that work for you, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, we work at the pleasure of council. We will make it work.
Okay, so you want to make that motion?
Motion, I move to defer the item to the June 16th meeting.
It'll be a special council.
To the special, June 16th special council.
Okay, you're seconding that, Council Palmer, is that correct?
I can second it.
Sure, okay.
If somebody else wants to, they can.
Is this
It's on the
debatable?
record.
What's that?
Is this debatable?
Yeah.
I think because it's a specific date,
Done.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. It's a specific day, you don't have it.
He's got it.
I got it.
You got nothing? Great, Council Lucille, for you?
Yeah, I'm in favor of this.
Okay. Councilor Devlin?
I'm fine with it. I mean,
Councilor
I
Stevens?
can be convinced elsewhere.
I'm just trying to get through one day at a time, sir.
At a time to be specified.
Yeah.
But we know.
Late September, early October.
Yeah, I'm gonna call a question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Van Stroup, thank you for your time, all your work, and for being here today. I very much appreciate it. Sorry we didn't ask you more questions. That would have put you in a corner, but you know your stuff, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, council, we are gonna move on to item 11C, BC Interior Forestry Museum fence mural proposal. I don't know why this title gets so long, but anyway, Mr. Nato, any oversight on this before I put the motion on the table?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick summary. The BC Interior Forestry Museum has submitted a request to paint a mural on the existing wood fence on their site. So the mural will be approximately 456 square feet. The concept is centered around the organic structure of tree rings using a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes to reflect the history of the forestry industry in BC. The Public Art Committee reviewed the request on April 16th and was very supportive of it.
Great, thank you. Councilor Stiglers?
I'll move that the fence mural proposal for the BC Interior Forest Museum located at 5205 Highway 23 North be approved.
Seconder for the motion, Councilor Cherry. Any discussion on the motion? Saying none. Oh, you want to?
Nope.
Preemptive hand up.
All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, we are going to move on to Railway Museum window art proposal. Mr. Nettle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Second request, this was also received by the Public Art Committee on April 16th. So the Revelstoke Railway Museum is proposing to apply a vinyl film window covering on the windows fronting Victoria Road. So they'll be using some historic photos. Yeah, and the Public Art Committee was very supportive of this request as well.
Councilor Stiglers.
I move that the perforated vinyl window art for the Revelstoke Railway Museum building located at 719 Track Street West be approved.
Seconder, Councilor Cherry. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Devlin?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it, although I do think it's kind of strange that a railway museum is choosing to put trains on the window. Who would have seen that coming?
I think when I look, I don't know if there's any cooling properties to these things, but it gets pretty hot upstairs up there. So if it does, it'll be good. I know you see them on the buses around different communities, and Yeah, we can't see out, we're squat, but anyway, you can see a nice mural. Anyhow, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Someone sent a notification to our task members, is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor Souls. I believe Ms. Murphy is joining now.
Okay, great. All right, council, we have the Remuneration Task Force Memorandum and Recommendation. Does someone want to put that on the table? You want to, for me to go directly to our task force member and ask her some questions?
I'd like to go to the task force member to give us a brief description of everything.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. Ms. Murphy, welcome. Thank you. And thank you to yourself and Mr. Cross for looking at this again. I'm going to ask council members if they have questions of you, they can ask. And then we'll move forward in one way or another. Councilor Cherry, you want to ask questions?
Sure. I was hoping for a brief description of how you came up with these numbers, but I guess that'll just be my question.
Okay, great. So just to refresh everyone's memory, back in 2022 is when we first did this. Obviously, when you were all, before you were all coming in as council members. And that was a very in-depth process. It took us several months, and we really were starting from scratch. So this process is like, we only did it very quickly. It's really just rolling forward the logic of that with new data. So the main concepts of that report is, just to refresh everyone, remuneration. We're not looking at a wage. It's a different concept. What we're looking at is like a value that it's meant to replace what is given up to be on council, because obviously that takes time and energy from council and mayor. And it is based on, sorry. So it's based on, there's a process, there's a bit of a reference that we use that was based on a concept by UBC, the UBC, Union of BC Municipalities. Yeah. So we roughly use that, but then we also decided that we had this base floor level, is that we wanted to have living wage as kind of that lowest set amount that we would go. So the results of that in 2022 is to introduce an inflationary annual increase as well. So as of right now, that has increased to 26,000 annually for council and 52,000 for mayor. So in this review, it's important to note, like, the reason that you all requested it, like, inflationary increases don't constitute an actual increase. It's basically necessary to maintain our baseline amount. The review that we did is basically looking at that baseline environment and looking at different economic changes and changes in situation to ensure that that inflation adjusted baseline is still valid. So that resulted in a recommended remuneration for 2026 for the incoming council and mayor of 68,000 for mayor and 34,000 for council. So overall, we didn't change the comparable municipalities. There hadn't been a census update. There's really not much gain in that. It's only 4 years ago. A lot of the factors that we used haven't changed that much. I had to sub in a few for lack of data. A few of the ones we used before just didn't submit surveys, so we didn't have the actual amounts they were paying for council and mayor. But all the other factors in the data remain the same. So we basically just rolled forward what we have, and with the new mayor and council remuneration and the new living wage, and compared. I think the most significant change was really only one significant change to those comparables. The living wage to establish that floor had increased 42% over the last 4 years. It's important to note that in the 2025 living wage update for Revelstoke, the calculation was added the cost of owning a car. So there was a 9% increase last year, and that can mostly be attributed to car ownership being a change in the calculation. We discussed that factor here, and realistically, given that we do reimburse council for the use of their vehicle, it's a reasonable thing to include in a new baseline. So we decided to just note that and carry forward with that living wage baseline as is. So the comparable data set for this one, the media remuneration and so we just based it on mayor for simplicity, but the mayor is currently on 52,000 a year, and the comparable median data set came out at 52,000 per year. Also, the living wage baseline came out to 52,000 per year. So it was kind of interesting to see that inflationary adjusted baseline kept up with the minimums, but those minimums that we had set came up to meet what we had set as an actual above that last time. So it did indicate that, like, if we're going to follow the logic and recommendation from our last report without making any real subjective thoughts or changes to it, that we have to adjust that baseline. So seeing as the living wage went up 42%, essentially that 68,034% is purely an adjustment of the baseline set last time to follow that living wage increase. It also roughly follows that increase of median wage from the rest of the comparable data set. It's a little bit higher than that increase was. But yeah, it was a really interesting process to like take what we did last time and roll it forward. Going into it, I wasn't sure there would be that much of a change, but there was. And I guess that's all kind of the data. I just want to give you a bit of the justification of when we talked about, like, is that realistic? Are we recommending something outlandish? Like, as Stephen and I are both people that pay wages, I obviously have a lot of exposure to lots of different wage payers in my job. But anecdotally, like, wages have increased more than an inflationary increase since 2022. We both felt that. And visibly also, there's been a lot of growth and development and change in Revelstoke since 2022 as well. And yeah, overall, hopefully, based on council's recommendation and what they want to go forward with, it is kind of a lever way that we can use to draw out more competitive candidates for future elections. And that's the overall goal of this remuneration. So that is, yeah, any questions? That's what we came up with.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Seeing no, Councilor Palmer?
Yeah, just to comment that, thank you very much to Steve and to you, Miranda, for doing this work. It's, I think it's helpful, and you're both very, very thorough, and you were in the past there as well, Stuart. And so just thank you for doing that work. I very appreciate it.
All right, Councilor Chair.
Thanks. To the chair, Miranda, you mentioned that wages have grown within the community and you see a lot of that in your work. Can you tell us what the annual growth rate has been over the last 4 years? Any idea?
I don't have that quantified, and I don't think I could technically tell you.
Understood.
But yeah, I'm just like, I guess like the living wage has put pressure, and you do see more people popping up following it. I've seen that publicly posted a few times, so it's a cool measure to have for our community to follow.
Councilor Lana.
Yeah, through the chair, Ms. Murphy, I was wondering about compared to the original report that the task force completed in 2022, you had a weighting system that factored in a bunch of different things like population and comparative sizes. One of the things I'm wondering here is, in terms of that basket of
comparable communities, how much have you weighted us in that sense in comparison to what other similar baskets of communities are compensating for the role?
I think so. The weight is based on a number of different factors. I have the report in front of me. We didn't change it at all. So I had to pick a few different communities. We didn't change the weighting. The last report, sorry, I just don't have it on the top of my head. Okay, so population was weighted at 38%. Total municipal revenue was weighted at 24%. Total tax base at 15%. Total land area at 13%. And then yes or no, if it was an MRDT collecting community, at 10% of the weight.
Not really, just, yeah, no, I guess while we're in this presentation, I've got comments.
Okay. Councilor Terry.
Thanks again. It seems like council remuneration is always playing catch up. With this being a census year and our anticipated population to be closer or over 10,000, what would that do to this analysis in front of us right now for the next council? Are we coming in too high, too low?
Likely not much. Like population's only a factor of 38%. And when you look at like where that sits in the comparables, I haven't played with it, but it might shift us like one, up, down one in that weighting, which might change one of my upper or lower comparables. And if you're looking at a median rate, it's probably not going to change it much.
Thanks.
All right. You have a motion in your package. Somebody want to put that on the table? Councilor Lando, Councilor Lucelle.
Yeah, I'll move that the base remuneration for the council members elected at the 2026 general local election be approved as recommended in the council remuneration task force memorandum dated April 20th, 2026. Mayor, $68,000 annually, councilors, $34,000 annually.
Seconded for the motion. Councilor Devlin, now discussion on the motion. Anyone have Councilor Lando and Councilor Devlin?
I think Councilor
Doesn't go for it.
Yeah, I'm not really going to support this at this point. I think it's a bit too much. One of the things I noticed when I was going through the report is the basket of comparable communities has changed since the original report. Some of the communities are the same, some are different. In addition, the numbers that are included, it is not complete. There's missing tables in the chart, I guess, that was done by staff, so several are missing, and most of the information was saying it was from 2021 or 2020. I did just a little bit of quick online search, and for the places where there was no data, I was able to track down those numbers through SOFI, Statement of Financial Information. So in this list before us, there is updated data, which may point to an increase or allow us to compare favorably or not to other communities. But without that information, I feel that it's missing to make this decision at this time. You know, the living wage calculation, you know, using that word in that system is, I think, something that a lot of people would say, hey, makes sense and supports, but the hourly requirement or the hourly estimate of 18, and I think it was 36 for the mayor, is a bit arbitrary. Some people may spend more, some people may spend less, but what that does by focusing entirely on the living wages, steer it towards an employment based compensation rather than which it is not. It is different from that. So I don't support this amount right now. I think it's too much, and I think without the data before us that was requested at the last meeting, we're not going to be able to, we don't know comparatively. There could be a stronger argument for this, and I would encourage waiting until we have the data from the comparable communities in order to make that determination. Thank you.
Councilor Billmore?
Yeah, through the chair, I guess, my comments on this are, I can kind of, in a certain way, agree with some of the things Councillor Orlando is saying, but I think I'm on the entire opposite side of the fence of him. In terms of, but I do agree. We look at expected weekly hours. I think that's a terrible metric. I would argue that you are a city councillor, and this is probably doubly true for the mayor 100% of the time. You don't get to take that uniform off. You don't get to put it aside. If a member of the public wants to speak to you about something that is city related, you are on call 24/7, 365 days a year. You don't get to say, not today, I'm on vacation, unless you're not. I've never had a job where you can't take off the uniform before, and I find that that is maybe one of the more challenging parts of this position. I do agree it's not directly comparable to employment. It isn't directly comparable to a wage, but you need a standard of living in any situation, in any community, and I think that is the best metric we have for the standard of living. I don't believe that anybody who is expected to do this with the demands that come from this position should ever be able to say that they can't afford to do this. I think that is and I've heard people say that before. I mean, it's been said around this table kind of jokingly, but it's a very true point. If it ends up essentially costing you money to be doing what is essentially a public service, I don't think that that's the correct way to go about it. I don't think anybody should be getting rich off being a municipal elected official. I don't think I want to see people making, $250,000 a year in this elected, because that's the wrong reason to do it. We're obviously not here for the money. But yeah, I guess my closing statement on this is about time.
Okay. Good. Any other comments from council? Councilor Stevenhurst?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be supportive of it either. I think there's a number of items that we could do to attract better future councils, some of which I've tried to implement. And I think overall, some of the information that was in this report, I think is lacking. I think, the remuneration for childcare, I think that, currently it's pegged at about $20 an hour. Virtually impossible to find childcare for 2 kids, as you may note, in this community at that rate. And I think there's a number of things that we could be looking at to make this a better, more conducive council. I think if this wage was tied to some of those, then I'd probably be supportive of it, because we're looking at it from a more holistic standpoint, as opposed to just a dollar figure per hour. And I know personally, there's a lot of events that I go to, and I don't calculate out how many hours I spend on council, because I'd rather not think about it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments from council?
Just a quick follow-up. Well, I do agree that remuneration for childcare is a different conversation and should absolutely be addressed. I do think it's a very low number. That's not what I'm going to base any decision on, because not every councillor here requires childcare. Not every councillor in the next council will require childcare. If all we're doing is saying we will attract based on a thing that some councillors need and some don't, and get no compensation for it because they don't need it, that's probably not a very realistic way to use your term. So I do agree that that's a separate conversation and needs to be had, but
certainly, and honestly, I think regardless of what the wage is, I don't think anybody, I think you're going to have a really hard time justifying a wage that correlates to what anybody around this table should be getting paid for the amount of time and energy that they invest into this position, if you're doing it properly, right? I mean, whether it's $2,500 or $3,500, I think it's all sort of a volunteer position at a certain point, right? And I think you made the comment people can't afford to do it. I'm not sure, how do you make it more, like, just raising the hourly rate doesn't necessarily make it more affordable. Make the hour, like the working hours better. I mean, initially we were starting at, 3 o'clock for council meetings and running till 7 o'clock in the evening. I think that's a bigger detriment to young families, you know, start a meeting at 9 o'clock, run till 4 o'clock, you know, and then see who you're attracting.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree that there are improvements that can be made, but I think those are separate conversations.
Councilor and Councilor Cherry and Councilor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. And again, thank you to Steve and Miranda for the work. Just a reminder, this council did assign this to them, and I think it's very, unless there's some real material problem with it, we should go along with that. As far as the remuneration goes, I have split thoughts on it. It could be zero, it could be, a wage. I really appreciate the qualification Miranda made regarding remuneration. It was never, we keep on throwing this word wage, and I know the community puts around wage. It just does not work. And some counselors here know, go work at McDonald's, go wherever. You're going to do far, far better financially if that's the motivation. And so, I get torn with the whole idea of what's the right remuneration. There will always will be, whenever councils are dealing with this, there's going to be, well, what about this thing? What about that thing? But it ultimately is remuneration to at least compensate for what's taken from our life otherwise. So I super appreciate that. And on that basis, I wholeheartedly support the recommendations going ahead as far as the remuneration. And I just thank the committee for doing that, and we move on. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councilor Cherry.
I'd like to pass my time over here to the left first. Sure. Thank you, Mayor Souls. In regards to this, I do want to thank the Remuneration Task Force for giving us these numbers. I have to agree with Councillor Palmer that yes, this is not a wage. We can't apply that same metric. But at the same point, some of us are missing out on work hours to be able to come here and do the service for our community. So that has to be considered. And going towards the argument that raising the remuneration makes it more affordable, it does, because it will allow more people who are integrated within our community to come forward and be able to take on this position within our community to offset some of their wages that they would be losing at a job, to be able to be here to sit in at these council meetings. So it's allowing people that maybe aren't in the, set for life kind of mentality within the community and can have a better lens on the social aspects or the tourism aspects to create a better dialogue at the table.
Thank you, Councilor Cherry.
Thanks. Council sent this to the Remuneration Task Force to look at it, to see if we had fallen behind or if we were above. And they have come back with a recommendation showing that council remuneration has fallen behind in the last 4 years. They made a recommendation for the next council. We are not voting ourselves a raise. We're not voting ourselves anything, as was recommended by previous council and previous remunerations. I have to agree with it.
Okay, thanks. I'm very appreciative of both Stephen and Miranda taking this on. They did the hard work back in 2022 along with Stuart Andrews. Appreciate what they've done. I'm supportive of this because of all the reasons everyone said around the table, but Miranda broke it down very well. And the fact that these two citizens are willing to take this job on and look at it from a perspective of what's going to be best for the community, not what's going to pad the pockets of this existing council, what's going to attract new people as we move forward. So we've all had a chance to speak. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Staplener's, Councillor Orlando are opposed. Balance of council's in favor. This motion passes. Moving on to communications. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I appreciate you being here and taking the time, and for you and Ms. Murphy doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, moving on to communications, Revelstoke Area Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mayor Sauls. Just a quick recap, and I will start out by saying that I know Mayor and Council, everyone's read the material. Anybody who wants to get in depth on any of these reports that we're reporting out on can go onto the city website, look for the meeting, and pull this up. The reason I say that is quite a long report, and I'm not going to do it justice, but some of the activities that we were up to includes Tech Strategy 4.0. We had a great event, the broadcast event the other day, and that's going to nice segue into redoing our tech, or updating our tech strategy, which is something that's been around since 2015 or something like that. This will be our 4th iteration. That's an exciting project coming up. The committee staff have hosted a bunch of events recently, including the broadcast events at the theater and several others that are listed in the report. It does provide an update on the BC Air Access program is one of the other things. So we applied in January. We're hoping to hear back in June. We oversaw the READY grant program, which was updated and has been to council. A key thing for staffing is we have been without a director for I think the majority of this term. And there is some expectation on the staff report that we should have one by June. So I know our understaffed department would be really appreciative of that. There was a bit of update on the West Side Road study, which is looking at best uses for our Section 17 lands over in the dam area. And the results of that are scheduled to come to council sometime soon.
Any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I'll move on. Heritage Advisory Commission, Councilor Chair.
Got a couple of recommendations. The APC has recommended, the Heritage Committee has recommended that the Heritage Advisory Commission is in support of the Revelstoke Heritage and Advisory Planning Commission bylaw number 2438, which is essentially the merger of the two groups.
Okay.
And the other recommendation is the Heritage Advisory Commission recommends that council review council procedures, bylaw number 2135, to consider removing limitations for commission members to attend meetings virtually to increase participation and meet quorum. We currently have pretty loose regulations for zooming into meetings for council, but not for our committees and commissions.
Okay. Interesting.
Didn't know that.
Okay.
Either
So
that.
we'll have a look at that, the governance level. Any comments from council? Councilor Rowan.
Just a question. I know we have formalized policy for council, but is it actually required by default to have them in person, or could they just join remotely, or is it specifically prohibited?
If I can, it's not prohibited, it's limited.
Okay, so there's wording saying you can only come like once a month or something, remotely, or once a year or so. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
For a high level overview, that's the issue.
Any other comments?
Just a question to staff, does that apply to committees as well as commissions?
That's what I was asking.
Thank you, Councilor Palmer. I believe originally when COVID happened, we got rid of that limitation. Having said that,
Better relook.
I think we need to look at it.
Right, so probably something for governance.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's what they found when they went through it.
I mean, the good news is they have specifically what bylaw is there for you, so it should be easy to govern.
Public Art Committee.
All right, we talked about a few things at today's meeting, so I won't go over those. There's a call for public art at City Hall. That's number one, and then we chatted about a mural proposal for 301 Mackenzie. And the rest will be in camera.
Okay, good. And then any comments from council? Seeing none, BC Farmers Nutrition Coupon Program letter. I sent a letter off to Minister Josie, and she's responded in a positive that that program will continue. So that's an important aspect for those in our community to be able to get nutritional food. They don't just get given the nutritional coupons, they actually have to do a program to get them. And then they're presenting their coupons to members at the farmers market and are able to exchange that for food, which I think is an incredible program. All right, Ms. Delaselle, any questions online from the press?
We have no questions online, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. I'd like to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter. Somebody want to make that motion for me, please? Councilor Devlin, Councilor Orlando, all in favor? Motion's carried. We'll come back in camera in a couple minutes.